Love bombing happens when a person or group overwhelms someone with attention, praise, and affection in a short amount of time. It can feel amazing at first. You might think you've finally found people who truly see and value you. They compliment everything about you, from the way you talk to the choices you make. They tell you that you belong, that you're special, and that they've been waiting for someone like you. It feels like you've come home. This approach is not random. It's used on purpose to create emotional attachment very quickly. When someone receives this much validation all at once, it makes them feel safe and accepted. If they were lonely, insecure, or searching for meaning, love bombing can feel like a miracle. The attention becomes addictive. The praise feels like truth. And once that bond forms, it becomes much harder to question the intentions behind it. Imagine you join a community that claims to offer personal growth. On your first visit, everyone smiles at you. They want to know your story. They tell you how brave you are for seeking change. They share their own experiences and talk about how much the group helped them. Before you know it, they're hugging you, inviting you to meals, calling you family. You might leave that day feeling lighter than you have in years. But beneath that warm welcome is a strategy to lower your defenses. This tactic works because humans are wired to seek belonging. When you meet people who seem to offer unconditional love right away, your brain releases chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin. You bond fast, you feel connected, your guard drops, you trust them, even if they've done nothing yet to earn that trust. And because you feel good around them, you're more likely to listen to what they say, follow what they do, and accept their values without questioning them. Love bombing often comes with a time pressure. New members are told they're lucky to have found the group when they did. They're told that not everyone is ready or chosen. This creates a sense of urgency. If you wait, you might miss your chance to belong. If you hesitate, it might mean you're not ready for the truth. The praise you receive is tied to how quickly you commit. If you agree to stay, you're loved. If you hesitate or push back, the affection starts to fade. That shift can be confusing and painful. Consider a scenario where someone joins a spiritual retreat. On arrival, they are greeted with hugs. The group cheers their presence. They're given a special seat, a new name, and a mentor. Everyone thanks them for coming. The leader makes time to speak with them one-on-one, something rare. The person feels honored. After a day or two, they are told their energy fits the group perfectly. They are encouraged to stay longer. The retreat ends, but they're invited to an extended program. They feel chosen. They want to go. They ignore their doubts. The praise felt so real. It must mean something. But over time, that flood of attention narrows. The compliments turn into conditions. You're praised when you conform. You're ignored when you resist. That same love that felt pure becomes a tool to steer you. You might not notice at first, but slowly you begin to behave in ways that protect the love you've received. You say what they want to hear. You act how they want you to act. You don't want to lose the closeness you found. Love bombing isn't always loud or showy. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, and specific. It might come as texts filled with emojis, late-night calls, or gifts that seem thoughtful. In group settings, it might be constant eye contact, warm smiles, or stories shared about how others in the group struggled until they joined. The key is that the affection feels intense and out of proportion to how well these people know you. That intensity is not about you. It's about pulling you in. If the affection fades once you start asking questions, that's often a sign. A healthy relationship can handle doubt. But in environments that use love bombing, doubt is seen as betrayal. You may be made to feel guilty for not being grateful. They may ask if you're closing your heart. They might accuse you of not being ready. This emotional pressure forces people to shut down their questions and return to the behavior that kept them in good standing. In romantic settings, love bombing can look like a whirlwind romance. Within days or weeks, someone might say they love you. They want to meet your family. They talk about the future. They say things like, "I've never felt this way before," or "We're soulmates." You may be told you're perfect, and in return, you open up. You share things you usually keep private. You feel seen. But if their interest fades the moment you challenge them or need space, you're likely not being loved. You're being managed. This tactic is also used in high control groups, religious movements, political collectives, or multi-level marketing schemes. In each case, the early experience is designed to overwhelm your need for caution. People don't join controlling groups because they want to be controlled. They join because they believe they've found community. The love bombing hides the hooks. Once someone is invested, they want to believe the affection was genuine. It's hard to admit that what felt like love might have been a method. So they rationalize, they double down, they stay. That's what makes love bombing powerful. It sets the emotional foundation before the critical mind can catch up. To recognize love bombing, pay attention to how fast someone moves emotionally. Ask yourself if they've had time to truly know you. Notice whether their affection is steady or tied to your agreement. See if they still care about you when you say no. These small cues help separate real connection from emotional manipulation. Isolation from outside influence is a key control tactic used by high control groups and individuals who want to shape the way someone thinks, acts, and sees the world. It works by slowly cutting off a person's connections to people, ideas, and information that don't come from the group. Once that person is separated from outside voices, the group's influence becomes much stronger. Without other perspectives, it becomes easier to believe only what the group says is true. This tactic usually begins with small suggestions. A group might say things like, "Your family doesn't understand what we're doing here," or "Your friends are negative and pull you away from your path." These comments don't seem harsh at first. They might even sound like concern, but they plant a seed of doubt about the people who care about you. Over time, these ideas grow into mistrust, and you begin to distance yourself. Let's say someone joins a group focused on spiritual growth. At first, everything feels welcoming. The people are kind, they talk about finding truth and living with purpose. But after a few meetings, the leaders begin to speak against outsiders. They say most people are asleep, stuck in lies, or blind to reality. If you mention your parents or your partner, someone in the group might suggest that these relationships are holding you back. They might say, "You need space from those people so you can grow without judgment." As that message is repeated, the person begins to question their support system. Maybe they had disagreements with family before, or maybe their friends didn't understand why they joined the group. The group uses those moments as proof. They say, "See, they don't get it, but we do." This makes the person feel closer to the group and more distant from everyone else. Isolation doesn't always mean total separation at first. It often happens step by step. The group might suggest you spend less time on social media or take a break from news sources. They may ask you to come to more meetings or join weekend retreats. These events are framed as ways to deepen your growth, but they also take up more and more of your time. Soon, there's no space left for outside opinions. When you do talk to people outside the group, you may start to feel uncomfortable. That discomfort often doesn't come from the conversation itself, but from what the group taught you to expect. If a friend asks, "Are you sure this group is helping you?" the warning signs go off in your head. You've been told that doubters are toxic or jealous. You pull away instead of listening. Over time, your world becomes smaller. In some cases, the group may demand total separation. They may say, "You can't move forward if you're still tied to your past." Members might be told to leave their homes, quit school, or even cut contact with family. These decisions feel extreme from the outside, but from within the group, they seem necessary. The person believes they are choosing truth over lies, growth over fear, purpose over comfort. A woman joins a coaching program that promises transformation. At first, she's excited. The leader seems wise and inspiring. The group praises her progress. Then the leader begins to question her outside relationships. "Your husband doesn't support your higher self," she's told. "He's keeping you small." The leader suggests a separation, just for a while, to help her step into her power. She resists at first, but the pressure builds. The group supports the idea. She feels seen by them in a way she doesn't feel at home. Eventually, she agrees. Once she's alone, the group becomes her main emotional connection. The more she depends on them, the harder it becomes to leave. Cutting ties isn't always about people. It's also about ideas. Groups may control what books you read, what videos you watch, or what conversations are safe to have. They may say that the outside world is full of lies, that only their teachings hold truth. This idea is known as information control, and it works hand in hand with isolation. If a person only hears one story again and again, that story becomes their truth. A teenager joins an online group that believes they hold secret knowledge about how the world works. They tell him that schools lie, that media is fake, that his parents are brainwashed. At first, it feels exciting to be in the know, but slowly, the group tells him to stop listening to anyone outside the forum. They say, "Don't talk to normies, they'll never understand." He starts spending all his time online. When his parents try to talk, he shuts them out. They're part of the problem now. The only people he trusts are in the group. Isolation also creates dependency. When you lose your outside connections, the group becomes your only source of friendship, guidance, and emotional support. That makes it harder to leave. Even if doubts appear, you may feel like you have nowhere else to go. You don't want to lose your sense of belonging. You may worry about being alone, judged, or rejected by those you left behind. The group uses that fear to keep you in place. Some people are more vulnerable to this tactic. If someone is lonely, grieving, or going through major life changes, they may be more open to connection. When a group offers that connection and then warns against others, it can feel like protection. It's not easy to see that the walls are closing in. The group makes it look like a safe space. In reality, it's a cage built from praise, promises, and fear. The goal of isolation from outside influence is not always obvious. It's not always spoken, but it shows up in behavior. If you notice that someone talks less to their family, stops seeing old friends, avoids media, or only trusts the group they've joined, they may be under this kind of influence. They didn't start out trying to disconnect. They started out looking for meaning, for answers, for support. The group gave them that, but only on its terms. By removing other voices, the group ensures that its voice is the loudest. Without challenge, its beliefs become facts. Its rules become truth. And the person, cut off from the world they once knew, no longer sees what's missing. They believe they've chosen this path freely, even as their choices shrink. The control lies not in force, but in silence. The silence of missing friends, unread messages, unanswered calls, and all the voices that once kept them grounded. Creating an us versus them mentality is a method used by controlling groups to keep people loyal and dependent. It works by dividing the world into two sides: those inside the group who know the truth, and everyone else who are seen as lost, dangerous, or corrupted. Once someone accepts this split, it becomes hard to trust anything outside the group. Doubt is labeled as betrayal. Questions are seen as attacks. Loyalty becomes the only safe path. The group frames itself as the only source of truth, safety, or meaning. Everyone else, whether it's family, friends, government, media, or other belief systems, is painted as wrong, blind, or even evil. This idea doesn't usually appear all at once. It begins in small ways. A leader might say, "Most people don't understand what we do here," or "The outside world isn't ready for this knowledge." That kind of language sets the group apart and suggests a hidden wisdom that others can't grasp. As the message repeats, the division grows stronger. Over time, it becomes, "You can't trust people out there," or "They'll try to pull you away from the path." This turns outside voices into threats. Any criticism of the group proves the narrative. If someone questions the teachings, the group says, "See, they don't get it. They never will." This thinking creates a closed system. There's no room for outside truth. If it disagrees with the group, it must be false. Picture someone who joins a wellness community. At first, they talk about healing, balance, and truth. The language is calm and peaceful, but over time, the leader starts making bigger claims. They say the medical system is broken, therapists are brainwashed, and mainstream science can't be trusted. The only answers, they say, are in the group's methods. Anyone who disagrees hasn't woken up yet. The group feels special. They're no longer just practicing wellness, they're on a mission. Now, when someone's partner questions the group, the reaction isn't thoughtful, it's defensive. "You don't get it," the person says. "You're part of the system." This kind of thinking leads to isolation and fear. It's not just about belief anymore, it becomes personal. The group teaches that those on the outside are not just wrong, but harmful. They might say the media spreads lies, schools are tools of control, or families try to pull you back into ignorance. When someone inside the group hears these ideas often, they begin to watch the world differently. A news report becomes an attack. A parent's concern becomes manipulation. The group becomes the only place that feels safe and true. Inside the group, loyalty is rewarded. People who speak against outsiders are praised. People who question the group are corrected or ignored. This encourages people to repeat the group's ideas even if they have doubts. They don't want to be seen as weak or lost. The group may use phrases like, "You're either with us or against us," or "We're in a spiritual war." These phrases don't leave space for nuance. They force a choice: stay loyal or become the enemy. In some settings, the us versus them mentality includes a larger story. A political group might say they are the last defense against chaos. A religious group might say they are the only path to salvation. A business cult might say they are the only people with the courage to succeed. Each one uses the same idea: we are the truth and everyone else is asleep, broken, or out to stop us. This belief makes members feel special. It gives them purpose, but it also traps them. If they leave the group, they don't just walk away, they fall into the enemy's hands. This mindset also creates fear. If the group says the outside world is dangerous, then leaving becomes a risk. Members might be told that ex-members fail, get sick, or fall apart. They might hear stories of people who left and lost everything. These stories often lack proof, but they serve a purpose. They create emotional walls. Even thinking about leaving feels unsafe. Consider a young man who joins a startup with a bold vision. The team talks about changing the world and working harder than anyone else. Soon, the founder begins to speak against normal people, those with 9-to-5 jobs, families, or lives outside the mission. He calls them quitters and cogs in the system. The startup becomes more than a job. It becomes a cause. Anyone who questions the culture is mocked or pushed out. The rest stay silent or repeat what they're told. The work becomes the truth. Outside voices are noise. People stop going home for holidays or answering calls from old friends. They say they just don't get it. And after enough time, they believe it. When this mentality sets in, it changes how people think. They no longer measure truth by facts or results. They measure it by loyalty. If an idea comes from the group, it must be true. If it comes from outside, it must be false. Even if the group fails, struggles, or acts unethically, members stay. They don't want to become one of them. This division doesn't always come from anger or hate. Often it's framed as protection. Leaders say they want to shield you from negativity or lies. They say they're keeping you pure or safe. But the effect is the same. You learn to fear other voices. You learn to doubt your own thoughts. You look to the group for meaning, for rules, for identity. Over time, this becomes a mental habit. Even if someone starts to have doubts, they struggle to express them. Speaking out feels like turning against the group. It feels like becoming one of them. So they stay quiet. They stay inside. They keep believing, not always because they want to, but because they're afraid of what it means to stop. By drawing a sharp line between insiders and outsiders, the group removes your ability to think for yourself. You can't weigh ideas fairly if one side is always wrong. You can't test beliefs if disagreement means betrayal. The us versus them mentality gives the group power not through facts, but through fear and identity. Once you believe only the group has the truth, they no longer have to prove anything. They just have to keep you afraid of everyone else. Charismatic leadership is a tool often used by high-control groups to gain trust, loyalty, and even worship from followers. The leader doesn't need to use force. Instead, they use charm, confidence, and stories to pull people in. Their voice draws attention. Their presence fills a room. People begin to believe not just in the message, but in the person delivering it. Over time, the leader becomes more than just a guide. They become a symbol. They take on an almost divine role in the minds of followers. At the start, charismatic leaders present themselves as wise but relatable. They talk about their past struggles, how they overcame challenges, and how others can too. Their stories are crafted to create emotional connection. When they speak, it feels personal, even in a crowd. They pause at the right moments. They look people in the eye. They say what others are afraid to say. They seem bold, clear, and sure of themselves. That confidence makes people feel safe. Imagine someone enters a seminar on self-improvement. The room is full and the energy is high. Then the leader walks in. The crowd goes silent. The leader doesn't read from notes. They speak from the heart, telling a story about how they were once lost, just like the people sitting there now. They describe a moment of clarity, a turning point, and how everything changed. The audience hangs on every word. They laugh when the leader laughs. Some cry. At the end of the talk, people stand and cheer. The message was simple, but it felt profound because of how it was delivered. This connection doesn't come by accident. The leader studies how people react. They know when to raise their voice, when to whisper, when to share a personal detail to create intimacy. These techniques are common in performance, but here they're used to build emotional attachment. Followers begin to feel that the leader understands them better than anyone else. They trust not just the message, but the person. As time goes on, the leader becomes the center of everything. Group members repeat their words. They dress like the leader, copy their tone, and take their advice as truth. The leader may claim special knowledge, spiritual insight, business secrets, or a plan to save the world. Their claims go unchecked because their charisma keeps people from asking hard questions. Followers assume that anyone who seems that sure of themselves must be right. One example might be a young adult who joins a coaching group. At first, they're unsure, but after a few sessions, the leader begins to stand out. He speaks with passion. He remembers names. He tells stories that feel meaningful. One day, he says something directly to the young person, something simple like, "You're meant for more." That line sticks. It feels like a sign. From that moment, the person sees the leader differently. He's no longer just a speaker. He's someone who sees them deeply. They begin to show up to every event, buy the books, and defend the leader from any criticism. This kind of loyalty grows fast. The leader doesn't need to demand it. People offer it freely because they believe. When someone inside the group questions the leader, others often shut it down. "You don't get it," they say. "He's changed my life." The leader becomes untouchable. Their flaws are excused. Their mistakes are reframed as lessons. Their choices are seen as part of a bigger plan. The group often builds this belief by repeating the leader's origin story. They highlight their sacrifices, their early failures, and how they never gave up. The story gets told again and again until it becomes a kind of myth. The leader isn't just a person anymore. They're a figure of destiny. Some groups even say their leader was chosen by a higher power or sent for a special purpose. This turns normal devotion into something sacred. Charismatic leaders often surround themselves with loyal followers who repeat their messages and protect their image. These inner circle members help enforce group norms. They share stories about how the leader helped them, healed them, or saved them. These stories create pressure. If others were helped so much, who are you to question anything? Doubt begins to feel like betrayal. Another example is a small spiritual group in a rural town. The leader moved there from a city and started teaching about peace, energy, and truth. At first, people came out of curiosity, but soon, more people joined. They talked about how their pain faded after meeting him. They said he had a calming energy, that he could see things others couldn't. He never claimed to be divine, but others started saying it. He didn't correct them. Instead, he smiled and said, "Everyone sees what they're ready to see." With that one sentence, he kept control without taking responsibility. This indirect control is powerful. The leader rarely gives strict orders. Instead, they suggest, they hint, they create an emotional space where people want to please them. Followers begin to act not out of fear, but out of devotion. They want to be seen by the leader. They want approval. They want to feel close to that source of power and clarity. Over time, this bond can lead people to do things they would never do otherwise. They might give up jobs, relationships, or beliefs. They might accept teachings that make no sense or follow rules that feel wrong. But because it comes from the leader, it must be right. The leader's charm has replaced the follower's judgment. In more extreme cases, the leader creates a bubble around the group. They say the outside world is broken or lost. Only the group has the truth, and only the leader can guide them. This creates dependency. The leader becomes the only source of wisdom. The group stops thinking for themselves and starts thinking through the leader's voice. This control doesn't come through threats, it comes through admiration. The more someone admires the leader, the less they question them. The leader's power grows, not because they take it, but because people give it away. That's what makes charismatic leadership so effective and so dangerous in the wrong hands. Thought-stopping techniques are used by controlling groups to block doubt and stop critical thinking. They work by giving people simple phrases, mantras, or prayers to repeat whenever they begin to question something. These tools might seem harmless at first. They may even feel helpful, but over time they replace the process of thinking with automatic responses. Instead of exploring a concern, the person pushes it away. Instead of asking questions, they repeat the phrase until the question fades. These techniques often begin with good intentions. A group might teach members to calm their minds, reduce stress, or stay focused. They introduce a short saying like, "Trust the process," or "Doubt is the enemy." Members are told to repeat it when they feel confused or upset. It feels like guidance. It feels like a way to find peace. But in practice, it becomes a way to avoid thinking too much, especially about things the group doesn't want questioned. Imagine someone joins a spiritual program that focuses on finding inner truth. When they express concerns about the leader or the teachings, another member says, "Just stay in the light." It sounds positive, but it doesn't address the concern. Over time, the person learns that whenever doubt arises, they should say that phrase to themselves. Stay in the light. Stay in the light. The concern fades. The question is never answered. This is not clarity. It's suppression. Thought-stopping phrases are short on purpose. They need to be easy to recall, easy to repeat, and emotionally charged. A religious group might use scripture. A coaching group might use slogans. A cult might use a chant or invented term. The words vary, but the purpose stays the same. Stop the thought before it spreads. These tools work because the brain likes shortcuts. When people feel uncertain, it's easier to reach for a simple phrase than to sit with discomfort. The phrase becomes a mental button. Press it and the problem goes away. But the cost is high. Doubt is a natural part of thinking. It's how people notice red flags. It's how they protect themselves. When you learn to shut it down without examining it, you lose that defense. In some groups, members are taught to use a mantra the moment they feel negativity. They repeat it in their head or out loud. Only truth lives here. Everything happens for a reason. The leader knows best. These phrases don't solve problems. They don't answer questions. They just fill the space where a question might grow. The more someone uses them, the harder it becomes to think beyond them. Picture a young man who joins a self-help network. He feels energized at first. The leader talks about freedom and personal power. But after a few weeks, he starts to question some of the rules. Why do people have to attend so many meetings? Why are certain books banned? When he brings it up, a senior member pulls him aside. "That's your fear talking," she says. "Say the affirmation. Say it until the fear goes away." He feels embarrassed. He wants to stay in good standing. So he says the phrase, "Success lives outside comfort." He says it again and again. His doubt fades, but the questions don't get answered. Over time, he stops asking. Groups that use thought-stopping often teach that doubt is a weakness. They say it shows lack of faith, lack of commitment, or spiritual failure. This creates shame. Members don't want to admit when they feel uncertain. They keep quiet. They repeat the phrases. They act confident. Inside, they may still question, but they've learned not to voice it. This silence protects the group from challenge. In high-control environments, people often use these techniques on each other. If someone starts to express concern, others respond with the phrase, "Everything happens as it should. Trust the leader. Don't feed the doubt." It becomes a reflex. The group doesn't need to censor questions. Members do it themselves. They learn to shut each other down in the name of staying positive, staying loyal, or staying awake. This tactic works best when it's introduced early. New members are taught the phrases quickly. They hear them repeated often. They see others using them. They learn that repeating these words brings approval. It shows that they belong, that they get it. Soon, they adopt the habit. They use the phrases even when no one is watching. They stop exploring ideas that might lead them outside the group's beliefs. Sometimes the phrases are tied to fear. A group may teach that doubt invites danger. Saying the mantra is seen as protection. If you don't say it, you risk losing your way, your purpose, or even your life. In one group, a man was taught to repeat a chant if he started thinking about leaving. He believed that stopping the thought kept him safe from spiritual harm. The chant didn't answer his fears, it just buried them. Not all mantras or affirmations are harmful. In therapy or recovery, short phrases can help people ground themselves or manage stress. But in controlling groups, they are used to block thought, not support it. The difference lies in purpose. If a phrase helps someone reflect, it can support growth. If it shuts down reflection, it can be a trap. One subtle danger of thought stopping is that it feels peaceful. It can create a sense of relief. The mind goes quiet. The doubt goes away. It feels like a solution. But this calm is false. It's not based on understanding. It's based on avoidance. The problem hasn't been solved. It's just been silenced. Over time, this silencing changes how people think. They lose the habit of asking questions. They forget how to challenge ideas. They stop trusting their own thoughts. If a concern arises, their first response is the phrase. If a contradiction appears, they repeat the mantra. The ability to think clearly weakens. The group's voice becomes louder than their own. In a workplace that uses high-pressure coaching, an employee begins to notice that success stories don't match the results she sees. She brings it up. Her manager says, "You're just not aligned yet. Say the mission statement to yourself." She does. It doesn't feel right, but it stops the conversation. She stays. She keeps saying the words. Months later, the doubts remain, but she can't find the language for them anymore. The slogans took their place. Thought-stopping techniques may look like tools for focus, peace, or strength, but when used to block doubt, they serve control. They replace questions with scripts. They train people to obey, not with force, but with silence. The silence begins in the mind and spreads until there's no space left for truth. Information control is a method that groups use to shape what members think by limiting what they can learn. When a group restricts outside sources and controls internal teaching, it becomes easier to guide belief and behavior. The less access someone has to outside ideas, the harder it is for them to compare, question, or leave. This strategy doesn't need force. It works through slow, steady control over what someone reads, hears, or sees. A group that practices information control doesn't always say, "Don't read anything else." It often starts with a warning. The leader might say that mainstream news is biased, that science is corrupt, or that outsiders spread lies. They don't ban information outright. They cast doubt on it. That doubt grows until the member stops looking at anything outside the group. They trust the group's materials, lectures, and texts. Everything else becomes noise, or worse, a threat. Imagine someone joins a group that teaches an alternative form of healing. At first, they're told to explore and trust their own experience. But soon they're told not to talk to doctors. Medical advice is framed as dangerous. The group says doctors push pills and ignore the truth. Articles that question the group's methods are dismissed as fake. Members begin to read only what the group provides: pamphlets, blogs, speeches by the leader. Anything that disagrees is labeled as negative energy or closed thinking. The person starts to avoid health advice from outside. Even when sick, they don't call a doctor. They rely only on the group. In another case, a political collective offers training on activism and social change. Members are given reading lists, podcasts, and articles approved by senior members. At first, the material feels fresh and insightful. But when someone brings in a book from a different source, the reaction is cold. They're told the author has compromised views. They're warned to be careful about bringing in ideas that might confuse others. Soon, people stop sharing anything not approved. The group's ideas become the only ones discussed. Debate fades. Echoes grow. Information control often hides under words like protecting the community or staying pure. Leaders say they don't want members exposed to harmful messages. But what counts as harmful keeps growing. At first, it might mean hateful or violent content. Then it includes critical blogs. Then family members who raise concerns. In the end, anything that causes doubt is removed. Groups also control information by rewriting it. They change past events to fit their message. If a leader makes a failed prediction, the group might later claim it was symbolic. If a rule changes, the group may say it was always that way. This is called gaslighting. and it creates confusion. Members begin to distrust their own memory. They rely more on the group's version of events. Over time, they stop keeping track. They stop noticing contradictions. They accept what they're told, even when it shifts. Sometimes the control is physical. A group may ask members to stop using the internet or to delete certain apps. They may block outside websites on shared computers. They may confiscate phones during meetings or retreats. This isn't always framed as control. It's often described as a break, a fast, or a digital cleanse. But the result is the same. Members lose access to outside voices during key periods of influence. Information control also shows up in how groups respond to critics. Members are told that anyone who speaks against the group is bitter, lost, or evil. Ex-members are portrayed as failures who couldn't handle the truth. Media coverage is dismissed as biased. These stories aren't challenged, they're banned. If someone asks about a critical article, the response isn't discussion. It's a warning. Don't go down that path, that's darkness. Fear replaces inquiry. One woman joins a religious group that promises peace and purpose. She's given books, songs, and daily teachings. She's encouraged to limit outside reading. When her brother sends her a documentary that questions the group's origins, she's told to delete it. That's the devil trying to reach you, they say. She does. Over time, her world shrinks to the group's media. She forgets what life was like before. She trusts what the leader says because she no longer sees other options. Information control doesn't only limit what you read, it also controls how you talk. Groups often change the meanings of words. They create new terms and redefine old ones. This makes communication with outsiders harder. Members start using insider language that others don't understand. This isolates them. When they try to explain the group to others, they struggle, so they stop trying. Their world becomes more closed. Some groups train members to report each other. If someone shares a podcast or article that questions the group, they may be corrected or disciplined. This leads to self-censorship. Members stop exploring new ideas, not because they agree with the ban, but because they don't want trouble. Silence becomes survival. Curiosity becomes danger. In one group focused on entrepreneurship, a man is told to stop listening to outside business advice. He's told that other teachers don't have the right mindset. He's told that their strategies are flawed. The group insists their way is the only real way to succeed. Over time, the man stops reading books that once inspired him. He cancels his subscription to business magazines. He deletes podcasts. He only listens to the group's training calls. When his business stalls, he blames himself, not the system. He's never seen another way. The goal of information control is not just to keep people in, it's to stop them from seeing other choices. If you only hear one voice, you forget there were others. If you only read one view, it starts to feel like the truth. Control doesn't always come through threats or rules. It often comes through what's missing. Books not read, questions not asked, conversations never had. The silence grows until it feels normal. When people leave these groups, the flood of outside information can be overwhelming. Things they once dismissed suddenly make sense. Questions they were afraid to ask return. But inside the group, that freedom felt dangerous. Information wasn't seen as a tool, it was seen as a weapon. Members learned to fear it. That fear kept them loyal. Not because they were stupid or weak, but because they weren't allowed to know any better. That is the power of information control. Indoctrination through repetition is a method used by controlling groups to shape belief and suppress doubt. It works by exposing members to the same messages, phrases, and practices over and over. The content stays the same, but the delivery comes from different places: meetings, written texts, chants, songs, group discussions, and private study. Repetition creates familiarity. Over time, familiarity feels like truth. Members stop questioning what they hear because it no longer feels like a message. It feels like common sense. This process doesn't depend on the strength of the message. It depends on frequency. When someone hears an idea enough times, their mind treats it as important. The message takes root not because it's logical, but because it's constant. The more someone repeats the group's phrases and ideas, the more natural they feel. After a while, the member begins to use the language even in private thoughts. The group's voice becomes their own. This often begins with slogans. A group may have a phrase like, everything happens for a reason, or trust the process. At first, the phrase is explained. Later, it's just used. People repeat it in response to doubt, struggle, or fear. It becomes a shield against critical thinking. Members start using the phrase when they talk to others, then when they talk to themselves. It becomes a mental reflex. Imagine a person joins a leadership course that promises personal growth. The course opens with a speech full of strong, simple phrases. You are the problem. You are the solution. No excuses. These lines are repeated during the session, written on the walls and printed in the workbook. By the end of the first day, participants are saying them back without thinking. Each time someone expresses confusion or concern, the coach responds with a line from the course. No excuses. It cuts off the conversation. It gives a feeling of direction without offering a real answer. The participant leaves feeling energized, but also more dependent on the course to keep that energy going. The same happens in religious groups. Members may hear the same scriptures, parables, or prayers every day. They repeat these during worship, in conversation, and in personal study. The phrases become so familiar that members can say them without thought. This creates a comfort zone. When someone feels fear or doubt, they reach for the words they know. But those words often carry the group's doctrines. They keep the person inside the same thinking loop. Repetition also shows up in rituals. Daily routines, chants, or actions become part of life inside the group. At first, these rituals feel meaningful. Later, they become automatic. But even then, they continue to shape the members' thinking. Rituals reinforce belonging. They mark time, they create structure, and they always point back to the group's values. Every time the ritual is repeated, the member is reminded, this is who we are. This is what we believe. In one case, a man joins a meditation center. Each morning begins with the same sequence of chants, followed by a lecture from the founder. The chants include phrases about letting go of logic and opening to truth. At first, the man finds this odd, but after weeks of repetition, it starts to feel normal. The phrases echo in his mind throughout the day. He starts to say them to others. When he questions something, he hears those lines in his head. Let go. Accept. He stops pressing the issue. Group discussions also reinforce doctrine. Members are encouraged to share how the teachings help them. They speak in the language of the group. When someone talks about doubt, others respond with stories that end in certainty. These testimonies follow the same pattern: confusion, struggle, breakthrough, belief. They act as proof, but only of the message the group wants to spread. Hearing these stories again and again makes members believe that doubt is always solved by going deeper into the teachings, never by stepping away. Written materials are part of this as well. Many groups use study guides, manuals, or daily readings. These often repeat key messages using slightly different words. The goal is not new information. The goal is reinforcement. The more times someone sees the same idea, the stronger it feels. Members are sometimes told to read the same material every day. They might even be required to memorize it. Over time, the line between learning and conditioning blurs. In a business mentorship program, new members receive a list of affirmations to say each morning. They include lines like, "I will succeed if I stay loyal," and "the system works if I work it." These are read out loud in group calls, printed on materials, and spoken by the leader. New members say them without hesitation. If a person questions a method or result, they're told to say the affirmations again. The repetition isn't about motivation, it's about shaping belief. Repetition also affects how people talk outside the group. Members start using the same phrases when talking to family or friends. This can create distance. Outsiders don't speak the language. They might ask, "What do you mean by that?" But the member may not know how to explain. They've said the phrase so often that it feels complete on its own. This limits communication. It also strengthens loyalty. The member feels more understood by people inside the group than outside. In more extreme groups, repetition includes rewriting personal history. Members are encouraged to reinterpret past events through the group's lens. Your suffering brought you here. You were lost until you found us. These messages are repeated until members believe them. Even memories begin to shift. The past becomes another tool of the group, shaped by its message. Over time, the group's language and ideas become the default setting in the mind. New thoughts are measured against old slogans. Conflicting ideas are pushed away without effort. This makes dissent hard. It doesn't feel like you're being silenced. It feels like you already agree. When you hear a new idea, the group's message shows up first in your mind. You've repeated it so many times that it gets there before your own thoughts do. This process doesn't feel forced. That's what makes it powerful. Members don't always realize they've been conditioned. They think they've grown, they think they've learned, but they've been trained to repeat, not to think. The message took root, not through evidence or reason, but through exposure. And now it shapes everything they see. Fear and guilt manipulation is a method used by controlling groups to keep people obedient and silent. It works by turning normal thoughts and feelings into sources of shame and danger. Instead of being allowed to doubt, question, or feel uncertain, members are taught that these reactions are signs of failure, weakness, or sin. Over time, the person begins to police their own mind. They don't need someone watching them. The fear and guilt do the job. Fear is often tied to punishment. This can be physical, emotional, spiritual, or imagined. The group might not say, "We will hurt you," but they make it clear that bad things will happen if you step out of line. They speak of betrayal, exile, illness, or eternal consequences. They paint a picture of what life looks like outside the group, and that picture is bleak. The message is simple: stay with us or suffer. Guilt is used to target the person's sense of right and wrong. Natural desires like wanting love, independence, or rest are framed as selfish or impure. Doubts are seen not as part of thinking, but as proof of brokenness. The member is taught to see these feelings as flaws. They try to suppress them. When they fail, they feel shame. That shame makes them turn back to the group for help, which only deepens the hold. A woman joins a religious group that promises truth and healing. At first, she feels welcome, but soon, the teachings focus on fear. She is told that those who doubt the path will be lost forever. If she questions the leader, she risks spiritual death. If she leaves, she will be cursed. She doesn't want to believe this, but the words are repeated often. She begins to have nightmares about falling away. When she confesses her doubts, the group thanks her for her honesty, but tells her she must fast and pray for forgiveness. She feels broken. She tries harder. This process doesn't rely on logic. It relies on emotion. The fear doesn't have to be real to feel real. The guilt doesn't need to be fair to feel heavy. The person reacts because the messages are tied to deep needs: the need to belong, the need to feel safe, the need to be good. The group offers these things, but only on its terms. The moment you step outside, the fear returns. Groups often use stories to reinforce this fear. They may tell of people who left and were ruined. A man left and got sick. A woman left and lost her family. These stories may not be true, but they are repeated until they feel true. They become warnings. Even if the stories are vague or secondhand, they serve the purpose. The member starts to believe that leaving the group leads to suffering. In a financial mentorship group, members are told that doubt is a mindset of failure. If someone questions the program, they are accused of resisting abundance. If a person leaves, they are mocked or blamed. They couldn't handle the truth. They gave up on their future. Members learn to hide their questions. If their income drops, it's their fault. If they feel overwhelmed, they are told to push through. No one talks about the pressure. Everyone keeps smiling. The fear of failure keeps them in place. Guilt often takes the form of self-blame. If you're not growing, it's because you're not committed enough. If you're unhappy, it's because you're not grateful. The group teaches that your pain is your fault. They say the teachings are perfect, so if you're struggling, the problem must be you. This belief is heavy. It keeps people stuck. They try harder, they sacrifice more, but they don't question the structure because they've been trained to look inward, not outward. Sometimes the fear comes from more subtle messages. The group may say, "The world is full of lies. Only we know the truth." This creates a fear of being misled. Members begin to think that outside voices are traps. A friend's concern becomes a test. A parent's worry becomes an attack. The member learns to stay close to the group, not just for approval, but for safety. Even if they're unhappy, they fear what might happen without the group. A young man joins a life coaching community. They tell him that he is powerful beyond belief, but that his old habits will destroy him if he's not careful. They say that if he misses a session, he risks falling back into lower energy. They teach that anyone who questions the system is afraid of greatness. When he begins to feel burned out, he tells his mentor. The response is sharp. That's your ego talking. Don't sabotage your future. He feels ashamed. He books another session. Children raised in controlling groups often feel fear and guilt without knowing why. They are taught early that certain thoughts are wrong, that certain questions are dangerous. Even when they don't understand the beliefs, they feel the weight. They grow up believing that being good means obeying, that doubting means failure. By the time they are old enough to think for themselves, the guilt is already part of them. Fear and guilt manipulation also keeps people from leaving. A member might want to walk away, but the fear of being punished, rejected, or ruined holds them back. They imagine their life falling apart. They imagine being alone. The guilt tells them they are ungrateful, that they owe the group everything. They remember moments of kindness, stories of change. They don't want to hurt anyone. They don't want to be the bad one. Even if the group never carries out the threat, the fear is enough. Even if the guilt comes from within, the pain is real. This emotional pressure doesn't leave marks, but it shapes lives. It makes people smaller. It makes them quiet. It makes them stay. They stay not because they agree, but because they're afraid to be wrong. They don't trust their thoughts anymore. They trust the fear. In every case, the goal is control, not just of action, but of emotion. The group doesn't just want obedience. It wants belief. It wants silence. It wants people who stay in line because they fear the cost of stepping out. The method is simple. Take normal feelings and twist them into proof of failure. Make people afraid of their own minds. Then offer the only way out: obedience, loyalty, silence. Promised salvation or enlightenment is a tactic used to gain loyalty by offering something no one else can give. A group or leader claims they have the only path to truth, peace, or purpose. Sometimes it's spiritual, other times it's mental, emotional, or even financial. No matter what form it takes, the promise is always framed as rare, special, and only available through them. If you leave or question the group, you risk losing your chance forever. At first, this promise may seem vague. A person joins a meditation circle or a coaching program. They hear words like awakening, healing, or transformation. These ideas carry weight, but their meanings are left open. The leader says things like, "Only a few are ready," or "You've been called." The group presents itself as a gatekeeper to something higher. Once that idea is planted, the person starts to believe they've been chosen for something others can't see. Over time, the message becomes clearer. The group offers more structure. It introduces terms, rituals, or levels of achievement. The leader says that by following their path, members will reach clarity, salvation, or full enlightenment. That promise comes with conditions. Members must follow rules, attend meetings, obey the leader, and give time or money. The cost is always worth it, they're told, because the reward is greater than anything outside the group. Imagine a woman searching for meaning after a major life event. She finds a group that promises deep spiritual growth. They welcome her warmly. The leader tells her she has a rare energy. She feels seen. Over the next few weeks, she attends classes and hears stories of people who found peace, purpose, and a deep sense of knowing. But every story ends with the same lesson. They only got there by staying loyal to the group. Doubts were roadblocks. Leaving was failure. She doesn't want to fail. She wants what they have, so she stays. The promise of salvation often comes with urgency. A group might say that time is running out, that the world is falling apart, or that a rare window of opportunity is closing. These ideas create pressure. If someone hesitates, the group warns that they might miss their only chance. Not everyone gets this, they say. You've been given something sacred. This message makes people feel lucky, but also scared. They fear losing the gift. That fear leads to obedience. Leaders who use this tactic often speak with certainty. They claim to have had a vision, a revelation, or a breakthrough no one else can access. They say they've walked the path already, so now they can guide others. Their confidence becomes proof. Followers believe not because of evidence, but because the leader seems sure. When the message is repeated enough, people begin to accept it without question. A man joins a high-demand coaching group that promises to unlock human potential. The leader says he has found the truth about success and energy. He teaches that only those who align with his system will reach their full potential. He says everyone else is stuck in low vibrations. He tells his followers that traditional paths like therapy, education, or family support won't work because they're built on lies. The only real path is his. Members begin to repeat this idea. They see others as asleep while they are waking up. This mindset separates people from outside help. If the group has the only path, then other views are distractions. If someone disagrees, it's because they're not ready. If someone leaves, they've fallen or chosen ego. These explanations protect the promise. They also protect the group. Instead of allowing doubt, the group reframes it as weakness. The promise of salvation remains untouched, even when people suffer or the group fails to deliver. Members may stay loyal even when they feel confused or hurt. They believe that if they just try harder, they'll receive the reward. If they struggle, they're told it's part of the process. Pain is growth. Doubt is the test. Loyalty is the way through. This belief system traps people in a cycle. They invest more to justify the time and effort they've already given. They stay hopeful, even when the path gets harder. In a startup disguised as a movement, workers are told they're not just building a product, they're changing the world. The founder says their company is the only one brave enough to challenge the system. Employees hear that they've been chosen for their strength and vision. Anyone who questions the long hours or low pay is told they don't get the mission. The company promises more than money. It promises purpose. People work themselves to exhaustion, not because they're forced to, but because they believe. Groups that use promised salvation often speak in absolutes. They say they have the only truth, the only method, the only way. That language removes alternatives. It also adds risk. If there's only one path, leaving it means being lost. Members begin to fear that no one else will understand them. They doubt their own instincts. They stop looking for other answers. Sometimes, the promised reward is tied to identity. A group might say that you're one of the chosen, the awakened, or the elite. That praise feels good. It gives meaning to your struggle. But it also creates a new fear, the fear of falling back. If you question the group, you risk losing your status. You stop being chosen. You go back to being ordinary. This fear pushes people to hide their doubts and keep performing loyalty. A teenager joins an online community that teaches secret knowledge. They claim to have uncovered hidden truths about society and the human mind. Members are told they are part of a small group that sees reality clearly. The teen feels special. He's found people who praise his curiosity. But when he starts asking deeper questions, he's told that questioning is a trap. Only those with discipline will reach the final stage. He's not ready yet. If he walks away now, he'll never get back in. He stays. He waits for answers that never come. The promise of salvation works because it speaks to human needs. People want meaning. They want hope. They want to believe that their pain has a purpose. When a group offers a path to something higher, it's hard to turn away. But when that promise is tied to control, silence, or isolation, it becomes a trap. Members believe they are moving toward freedom, but every step ties them tighter to the group that made the promise. The promise itself becomes the chain. Sleep deprivation is a tool used by controlling groups to lower resistance and increase influence. It doesn't always look extreme at first. The group may simply hold long meetings, ask members to wake up early, or schedule activities late into the night. These small disruptions add up. Over time, the lack of proper rest makes it hard for people to think clearly. It becomes easier to agree, harder to question, and almost impossible to reflect. Sleep affects more than just energy. It's tied to memory, focus, and emotional balance. When people don't get enough sleep, they react faster but with less thought. Their moods shift. Their ability to process complex information drops. This mental fog can be used to steer someone without them knowing it. A group can present ideas during times of low alertness, and those ideas face less resistance. The member might not fully understand what they're agreeing to, but they nod, they follow, they stay. A person joins a personal development retreat. The schedule looks intense. Morning sessions start at 5:30 a.m. and evening talks run until after 11 p.m. There's barely time to eat, and breaks are short. At first, it feels exciting. The pace gives everything a sense of urgency. But by day 3, the person is tired. Their body hurts. Their mind races. The leader gives a passionate talk late at night when everyone is worn out. Emotions are high. The group claps, cries, chants. The person agrees to a year-long program without fully thinking it through. In the moment, it feels right. The next morning, they don't remember everything that was said, but they feel committed. This tactic works best when paired with emotional pressure. Sleep-deprived people often experience intense highs and lows. If the group creates those highs through music, speeches, or rituals, members associate those feelings with truth. Their mental state is off balance, but the group provides meaning. This creates a false clarity. It's not based on reason, it's based on exhaustion and relief. Groups that use sleep deprivation don't always frame it that way. They might say that tiredness is part of the journey, that it shows commitment, that pushing past limits leads to breakthrough. Members are told to ignore fatigue, to lean in, or to trust the process. Questioning the schedule becomes a sign of weakness. People stay quiet about their needs, even when they feel sick or overwhelmed. In some cases, the leader uses personal stories to justify the lack of rest. They talk about how they once went days without sleep and came out stronger. They say real growth doesn't happen in comfort. The message is clear. If you want to reach the next level, you have to keep going. Members push themselves not because they want to suffer, but because they want to belong. They want to reach the promised reward. In a business training event, new recruits are kept in sessions for 12 hours a day with only short breaks. They are told to study late at night and show up early the next morning. The leader says that winners don't sleep. They act. After several days, people begin to nod off during sessions. They stop taking notes. They smile and clap on cue, but their eyes are blank. When a group decision is made, no one objects. They don't have the energy. The schedule becomes a way to move people through resistance without giving them time to think. Sleep deprivation also makes people more suggestible. They are more likely to believe what they hear, less likely to challenge what feels wrong. A tired brain wants easy answers. If the group repeats a clear message, "You are safe here," "The leader knows best," "This is your purpose," that message sticks. The member may not fully understand it, but they start to repeat it. That repetition feels like belief, even when it's just habit. A cultic group living in a shared home sets strict rules for sleep. Lights go out late, and members must wake up for 4 a.m. prayer. Anyone who misses the session must explain themselves. The leaders say this builds discipline. In truth, it builds dependence. After several weeks, the members walk and speak like they are half awake. They accept new teachings without question. They smile when told to, even if they don't feel it. They don't rebel, not because they agree, but because they're too tired to care. Even small losses in sleep can have big effects. Studies show that missing just 1 or 2 hours a night over several days can lead to mood swings, poor judgment, and memory problems. Groups take advantage of this. They may not keep people up all night, but they chip away at sleep just enough to keep members vulnerable. They adjust the schedule constantly, keeping people off balance. A surprise meeting, an extra ritual, a call in the middle of the night. Members can't plan. They can't rest. Their mental space belongs to the group. In some environments, people are praised for ignoring sleep. They are held up as examples. The ones who rest are seen as lazy or less committed. This creates peer pressure. No one wants to be the weak link. Members push themselves harder, not for the leader, but to prove something to the group. It becomes a contest and everyone loses. Sleep deprivation is often part of a larger system of control. It works alongside thought stopping, repetition, and information control. The less someone sleeps, the more these other tactics succeed. A tired person won't dig for facts. They won't notice contradictions. They won't have the strength to resist. They accept, they comply, and they believe. A student joins an intensive program that promises life transformation. The first weekend includes back-to-back workshops, group chanting, and long periods of silent reflection. Breaks are short, meals are rushed. The student feels overwhelmed but also excited. The exhaustion blurs their thinking. On the final night, the group gathers for a decision-making ritual. The student, barely awake, agrees to sign a contract. It commits them to thousands of dollars and months of future training. When they read it later, nothing makes sense, but they already signed. Sleep is not just a health need. It's a boundary. When a group breaks that boundary, it takes more than rest. It takes space. It takes time. It takes a clear mind to see what really happened. But in the moment, the member doesn't realize what they're giving up. They just know they can't think straight, and the group is right there, ready to do the thinking for them. Public confession and shaming is a method used to control people by forcing them to reveal personal thoughts or actions in front of others. The goal is not healing or understanding. It's about breaking the person down, removing privacy, and making them easier to manage. This tactic works by creating fear, exposing vulnerability, and reinforcing loyalty to the group. It often starts with small steps. A group may ask members to share something they feel guilty about. It's framed as honesty, growth, or spiritual cleansing. Everyone claps when someone shares. The room feels supportive, but over time, the pressure grows. The group starts asking for more. Members are expected to confess not just to mistakes, but to doubts, desires, or thoughts that go against group teachings. Anything less is seen as hiding. In one group, a man is told to admit that he questioned the leader's advice. He's asked to stand up and say it out loud during a meeting. At first, he resists, but others encourage him. "You'll feel lighter," they say. This is part of the process. When he speaks, people nod and thank him. The leader offers a correction wrapped in kindness. The man sits down feeling exposed, but also relieved. He's still part of the group. That relief is part of the trap. The group sets the rules, then offers comfort when you follow them. But the act of public confession changes something. It lowers the members' sense of privacy. It teaches them that even their inner world is not their own. The group now has access to their thoughts, their secrets, their guilt, and because they've shared it publicly, they can't take it back. Shaming follows when the confession doesn't meet expectations, or when the group wants to make an example. A member who admits to breaking a rule might be scolded or mocked in front of others. They may be told they're selfish, dishonest, or spiritually weak. The group may say they're not ready to grow. This isn't about correction, it's about power. The message is clear: step out of line and you will be exposed. In one case, a woman in a spiritual collective admits that she feels disconnected from the leader. Instead of support, she's told that her heart is closed. Others in the group agree. They say she's being arrogant, that she needs to surrender. The next day, her story is used as a lesson in group teaching. Her name isn't said, but everyone knows who it's about. She feels humiliated. She promises to work harder. She doesn't speak up again. Confession and shaming often come in cycles. The group creates rules that are nearly impossible to follow completely. Then it asks members to admit when they fall short. Even small mistakes become public: a missed meeting, a lingering doubt, a moment of anger. Over time, members learn to report on themselves before being called out. They try to prove their loyalty by being the first to confess. The group doesn't need to monitor them. They monitor themselves. Some groups formalize this process. They have confession circles or special meetings where everyone is expected to speak. Silence is seen as guilt. Members who hold back are pressured to open up. The leader may say, "You're not hiding from us, you're hiding from yourself." The idea is that withholding truth means you're resisting growth, but in reality, it means you're resisting control. This tactic affects how people relate to each other. Members begin to see each other's flaws more than their strengths. They remember the mistakes others admitted. They judge each other based on those confessions. Trust weakens. People stop forming real bonds. They smile, nod, and repeat the teachings, but inside, they feel alone. They don't know who might use their words against them. In one business mentorship program, weekly meetings include a truth chair. One member is picked to share their shortcomings. If they don't go deep enough, the group pushes harder. "You're holding back," someone says. "You're not being real." If the person cries, the group praises them. "Now you're doing the work." The leader says this is how people grow. But the effect is shame, not strength. The member leaves feeling small and more dependent on the group's approval. Shaming also creates fear. Once someone has been embarrassed in front of the group, they will do almost anything to avoid it again. They may lie to hide mistakes. They may turn on others to protect themselves. They may repeat the teachings more loudly to show they're loyal. This creates a culture where people compete to appear pure while hiding their real thoughts. Leaders who use public confession and shaming often claim they are helping. They say truth brings freedom. They say ego must be broken. But what they're doing is creating obedience. A person who is ashamed is easier to guide. A person who doubts themselves will follow anyone who seems certain. A person who has confessed deeply will fear being cast out more than anything else. Sometimes the group says that confession cleanses the soul or clears the mind, but members notice that only some confessions are praised. Others are punished. If a person says they struggled to follow a ritual but still believe, the group supports them. If they say they aren't sure the ritual matters, the group reacts with coldness. The rule is not be honest. The rule is say the right kind of truth. Children raised in these environments often learn early that silence is safer than honesty. They watch adults cry in front of the group, then get ignored or scolded. They see their parents confess, then work harder. The children learn not to speak what they really feel. They perform. They say the right things. Their inner world becomes a private space filled with fear. In high-control groups, confession becomes a test of loyalty. The more you share, the more the group accepts you. But the more you share, the more they own. If you try to leave, your past confessions become chains. The group may remind you of what you said. They may use it against you. They may say you can't be trusted outside because of who you were inside. The member may begin to believe that as well. They think, I've failed before, I'll fail again. They stop trusting themselves. They keep returning to the group, not because it helps, but because they believe they're broken without it. Public confession and shaming don't just affect behavior. They shape identity. They teach people to see themselves through the group's eyes. They take normal guilt and use it as a tool. They take human flaws and turn them into proof that the group must stay in control. The person breaks, then thanks the group for helping them. That is how this tactic works, by turning pain into loyalty and silence into safety. Financial exploitation happens when a group pressures its members to give money far beyond what is reasonable. The pressure can be subtle or aggressive. It may come through personal meetings, public ceremonies, or private guilt. The group often frames these donations as a test of loyalty, a measure of faith, or a spiritual investment. The more someone gives, the more they are praised. The less they give, the more they are questioned. It usually begins with a request that sounds fair. A leader might say the group needs funds for a new space, a project, or an outreach mission. Members are asked to give what they can, but soon giving becomes expected. People who hesitate are reminded that true commitment requires sacrifice. Those who give large amounts are celebrated as examples. Others follow, not always because they want to, but because they fear being left out or judged. A man joins a spiritual organization that helped him through a difficult time. He feels grateful. When the group holds a special fundraiser, he's told that giving back is part of his path. He donates a few $100s. A week later, someone from the leadership pulls him aside and asks if he can do more. You've been blessed, they say. Now it's time to prove your faith. They suggest he dip into savings. They say money given in trust always returns. He hesitates, but they assure him this is part of growth. He agrees. He empties a savings account he was keeping for medical needs. When the funds are gone, the group praises him as selfless. Some groups use specific teachings to justify financial demands. They may quote religious texts, success principles, or ideas about energy flow. In each case, the message is the same. If you give freely, you will receive more. If you hold back, you are blocking your own abundance. This idea creates shame. People don't want to be seen as fearful or selfish. They give more to prove they trust the path. In a high-pressure coaching group, members are told that wealth flows to those who invest in themselves. They are sold expensive courses, then asked to resell those courses to others. The system promises growth but requires constant reinvestment. When someone hesitates to buy the next level, the group accuses them of lacking belief. If you don't bet on yourself, why should anyone else? A mentor says. The person feels stuck. If they stop spending, they lose status. If they keep going, they fall into debt. but stopping feels like quitting, so they keep going. Financial exploitation is often tied to identity. Members are told that giving shows who they are. It becomes a spiritual act. It's framed as cleansing, freeing, or holy. This makes it harder to say no. Refusing to give starts to feel like turning your back on the group or even on truth itself. Leaders may ask, "What are you holding on to?" They say the money is not just about the group, it's about your own transformation. Some groups go further. They ask members to give everything: their homes, retirement funds, and family assets. These cases are rare but real. The group may promise that the world is ending or that a new age is near. They say the material world has no meaning. Giving up everything is framed as proof that the member is ready to rise. Members who question this are told they are still clinging to the ego or to fear. A woman involved in a healing community is told that she cannot reach full awakening while she's still attached to money. The leader explains that financial sacrifice is the final step before she's ready. She's not forced to give, but the pressure is strong. Other members share how they gave up everything and now feel free. The woman sells her car and donates the proceeds. Later, she's asked if she's ready to release more. She gives away her savings. When she starts to doubt, she's told that fear is normal and part of the path. In some cases, the group tracks giving. Members are asked to write down their donations. In public meetings, people are called out for their contributions. The more you give, the more access you get to private sessions, special teachings, or leadership roles. The less you give, the less valuable you become in the eyes of the group. Money becomes a gate to status. Some members give not because they believe in the promise, but because they fear losing their place. They fear rejection. They've been told that giving is how you stay aligned, how you stay safe. Saying no feels like stepping out of the circle. Once someone has given a lot, it becomes harder to leave. They feel invested. They think, if I walk away now, it was all for nothing. That feeling locks them in. Groups may also tie financial sacrifice to personal flaws. If a member says they can't afford to give more, they're told they're limited by a poverty mindset. They are taught that the problem is not the demand, it's their thinking. This turns financial stress into personal failure. Members feel ashamed. They try to fix the problem by giving more. Sometimes the pressure comes through love. A leader may act concerned. "I see you're holding back," they say gently. "What's stopping you?" This tactic sounds kind, but it shifts the blame. The member is made to feel that the problem is inside them, that they're broken or blocked. The solution, they're told, is to let go and give. In a tight-knit church, a couple gives beyond their means. They skip bills to support a building project. They're told it's God's will. When their financial situation worsens, they ask for help. The church says it's a test, that they must pray harder, that the blessing is coming. They wait. The blessing never comes, but they feel they can't leave. They've given too much, and they're afraid to start over. Financial exploitation doesn't always look like theft. Often it looks like generosity. But real giving is free from pressure. In high-control groups, it's not a choice, it's a condition. The member learns that giving is how they prove faith, show loyalty, and stay safe. The group creates the need, then sells the solution. And once someone has given everything, they have no choice but to believe it was worth it. Exploiting personal vulnerabilities is a tactic used by controlling groups to bring people in and keep them attached. The group doesn't usually say, "We target the weak," but their actions show it. They look for people who are hurting, lonely, or lost. They offer comfort, direction, and meaning. The approach seems kind, but it's not built on care. It's built on strategy. The more broken someone feels, the easier it is to reshape them. Vulnerability takes many forms. Someone might be grieving, newly divorced, recovering from illness, struggling with addiction, or simply lost in life. These moments create emotional openings. The person is searching for something, a new path, new people, or a way to make sense of their pain. Controlling groups watch for this. They know a person in distress is more likely to listen, trust quickly, and accept help without questioning the source. A man recently laid off from his job walks into a wellness center offering free meditation. He feels aimless. During the session, the group leader speaks about finding purpose after failure. The man relates. He's invited to a follow-up workshop. There, he's praised for showing up. People say his energy is strong, that he has potential. The leader tells him, "You were meant to be here." The words hit hard. No one else has said that to him in months. He keeps coming back. He starts seeing the group not just as helpful, but as necessary. This kind of recruitment is not by accident. Groups position themselves in places where vulnerable people go: support groups, online forums, therapy-adjacent programs, social justice spaces, or even job fairs. They offer answers, not questions. They don't say "figure it out," they say "we have what you need." They speak in calm tones. They use words like healing, alignment, freedom. But what they're doing is replacing one form of pain with another, less visible, more binding. People in crisis often crave structure. When life spins out of control, routine feels safe. A group might use strict schedules, regular meetings, and firm language to create that structure. The member adapts quickly because it feels better than chaos. But that new routine comes with beliefs, rules, and expectations. Soon the person is adjusting not just their day, but their mind. They start to adopt the group's values, not because they were persuaded, but because they were in pain. And this was what helped. A college student fails her first semester and starts to panic. She sees a flyer for a student support circle. She attends, and the group seems kind. They talk about discipline, higher purpose, and overcoming doubt. A mentor takes special interest in her. He says he sees strength in her struggle. He offers one-on-one coaching. She starts attending weekly meetings. She stops talking to her old friends. The group tells her those people were holding her back. She believes them. They gave her hope when she had none. Spiritual vulnerability is also common. Someone might leave their church, lose faith, or feel distant from old beliefs. In that moment of confusion, they're easy to influence. A group steps in and says, "We know what's real." The person listens, not because they agree right away, but because they want something to make sense again. The group doesn't debate, it comforts. It gives them a label, a ritual, and a path. Before long, the person forgets what they were even searching for. Financial vulnerability also creates openings. Someone buried in debt or facing eviction might join a program promising income, freedom, or success. They're told that if they follow the steps, they'll be rich and fulfilled. But the steps include buying expensive training, recruiting others, and cutting off distractions. The member invests what little they have. If it doesn't work, they blame themselves, not the system. The group says failure comes from lack of faith or poor mindset, not flaws in the plan. This keeps the person locked in, always trying to do better, never questioning the method. When someone joins during a vulnerable time, they often look back and say, "That group saved me," and maybe it did for a moment. But real care doesn't require obedience. Real healing doesn't punish doubt. In these groups, the help is conditional. You get support as long as you stay in line. You get attention as long as you agree. The moment you push back, the warmth disappears. You're told you've lost your way. Leaders often use vulnerability to build loyalty. They listen closely in early conversations. They learn what hurts, what scares, what drives a person. Later, they use those exact points to push. "Remember what your life was like before us?" they ask. "Do you really want to go back?" This makes the group feel like the only safe place. Even if things don't feel right anymore, the member stays. They don't want to return to that dark place. They believe the group saved them, and now they owe something. A recovering addict finds a community that offers support and purpose. The leader shares his own story of addiction. He says traditional rehab doesn't work, but his method does. The group offers structure and meaning. The man follows the rules, attends every session, and speaks about his progress. But when he starts to question a new policy, he's told he's not ready, that his doubt shows weakness, that relapse is near if he doesn't stay committed. The fear works. He stops asking questions. He stays silent. The group may even say that vulnerability is a gift. They frame suffering as proof that you were meant for this path. They say the pain was necessary so you could find them. This sounds comforting, but it's another form of control. If the group is the answer, then leaving becomes betrayal, not just of them, but of your own story. The person starts to see their past through the group's lens. They forget there were other ways to heal. Some groups turn members into recruiters. People who were once vulnerable now find others like them. They share their story, but with the group's version of the lesson. I used to be like you, they say. Then I found this, and everything changed. The new person sees hope and joins. The cycle repeats. One person's pain becomes another's hook. Exploiting vulnerability isn't about offering help. It's about finding people at low points and giving them relief with strings attached. The relief feels real. That's what makes it powerful. But it doesn't last unless the person stays. And staying means giving up freedom, doubt, and often identity. The help turns into a cage. The comfort becomes control. And the person, already in pain, learns to thank the group for holding the key. Creating a sense of urgency is a method used to pressure people into making quick decisions without time to think. The group or leader tells members that something big is about to happen. They say the world is about to change, a window is closing, or disaster is near. The message is clear: act now or lose everything. This creates fear and tension. It stops people from asking questions. It makes them act out of panic instead of reflection. The tactic often starts with a deadline. A teacher or guide might say, "This opportunity won't come again," or "Only a few will make it through the next phase." These words sound like advice, but they are designed to provoke fear. The person starts to feel like time is slipping away. They don't want to be left out. They don't want to be the one who missed the truth. So they act. They agree. They commit. In a self-development seminar, the speaker walks across the stage and tells the crowd, "If you don't make the choice now, you may never get another chance." He pauses for effect. "The next 10 seconds will define your future." He counts down. At the end, he tells them to sign up for the next course. Hundreds do. They believe they acted freely, but the pressure made it hard to think clearly. The countdown created a false sense of urgency. People didn't weigh the cost. They followed the mood. Groups often tie urgency to survival. They say the world is getting worse, that collapse is near, that only those who act fast will be saved. This fear pushes people to accept extreme rules, sudden moves, or harsh teachings. It creates a story of danger, with the group as the only safety. The more dramatic the message, the easier it is to override doubt. Even people who normally take time to decide start to react with urgency. A young man joins a movement focused on preparing for global change. The group tells him that systems will fall within the year. Governments, banks, even food supplies. They say they have the tools to survive and rebuild. But only if he commits now. He's urged to quit school and move into a shared house with other members. He hesitates. A leader says, "If you wait, you'll be watching from the outside. We can't help you later." The man gives in. He doesn't want to be left behind. Urgency also works by limiting access. A leader might say, "This teaching will only be shared once," or "Only 10 people will be chosen." These claims create scarcity. People rush to be included. They think, "If I miss this, I may never have another chance." In reality, the offer may not be limited at all. The group controls the sense of access to increase pressure and make members feel special for choosing quickly. In a financial freedom program, members are told they have 48 hours to invest in a training package. After that, the price goes up. The leader says only serious people act fast. This makes hesitation feel like failure. A woman who just joined the group doesn't know if the program is right for her, but she fears missing out. She pulls money from savings. The deadline was a tool. It removed her space to think. Urgency often pairs with emotional highs. The group stirs up excitement, fear, or hope through music, speeches, or rituals. At the peak of emotion, they call for action. The brain, filled with feeling, is less likely to reason. The person signs, donates, or agrees without asking for details. Later, they may not remember the full message, only that it felt important in the moment. This tactic shows up in religion, business, and activism. In a church setting, a pastor might say that the end times are near, and only those who give now will be spared. In a startup, a founder might say that only those who go all in today will be part of the next big thing. In a protest group, a leader might say that action must happen this week or the cause will be lost forever. In each case, the urgency pushes people to act fast and silence their own hesitation. Some groups use news events to increase urgency. A natural disaster, political conflict, or economic shift becomes proof that the group was right. "See," they say, "it's starting. Don't wait." They take the fear already in the world and link it to their plan. This doesn't help people prepare. It pushes them to rush, and the rush makes people easier to lead. A woman following a wellness influencer sees a post warning that major change is coming. The influencer says only her course holds the tools to stay strong. The course closes in 12 hours. The woman hasn't even watched the introduction, but she signs up. The post included a photo of burning cities and a quote about light in the darkness. It wasn't logic that moved her. It was the image of loss. Once urgency sets in, people stop comparing. They don't check other sources. They don't ask for advice. They believe they've found the answer, and that the moment will vanish if they wait. This turns personal choice into reactive behavior. The group calls it commitment. In truth, it's fear made to look like faith. After acting on urgency, members often defend their decision. They say it was fate. They say the timing was perfect. This reinforces the idea that the group knows something others don't. But when the promised change doesn't happen, members feel confused. Some double down. They say the shift was spiritual, not visible. Others start to doubt, but now they've already sacrificed. They've given money, time, or relationships. It's hard to admit they were pushed, so they stay. Creating a sense of urgency removes the space needed for real thought. It replaces choice with reaction. It uses time not as a guide, but as a threat. The person believes they're moving forward, but they're just moving fast, driven by fear, not direction. The group knows that people who act under pressure are easier to control, and so they keep the clock ticking. They say it's now or never. They say the window is closing. They say you must choose before you're ready. Because when you're rushed, you don't ask why, you just say yes. False scarcity is a tactic used by controlling groups to make something appear more valuable by saying it's hard to get. The group or leader claims that access is limited, that only a few people are chosen, or that secret knowledge is only available to the most loyal. This gives the impression that what's being offered is rare and precious. It creates pressure. People want what they think they can't have. The more limited something seems, the more people are willing to give up in order to get it. This tactic works because it triggers a basic part of human psychology. When something appears scarce, people assume it's valuable. They act fast to avoid missing out. In normal life, this shows up in sales, ticket releases, or job offers. In high-control groups, the stakes are much higher. The scarcity isn't about seats at a concert. It's about truth, purpose, or salvation. The group says, not everyone gets to be here. That message makes members feel special and makes outsiders feel desperate to join. At the start, a group might say they're not accepting new members, or they may say the leader only works with a few select people. This sets up a barrier. The person begins to feel that joining the group or getting close to the leader is a rare chance. They become more focused on proving they're worthy. They ignore doubts. They stay quiet about concerns. Their goal becomes acceptance. A woman interested in spiritual growth hears about a teacher who only takes 10 students a year. She applies and doesn't hear back. Weeks later, someone from the group contacts her and says, "There's one spot left. Are you ready?" She hasn't had time to think it through, but she doesn't want to miss the opportunity. She agrees, pays the fee, and joins. Later, she finds out that several people were told the same thing. There was no limit. The scarcity was staged. False scarcity can also apply to information. The group says they have special knowledge, but only those who reach a certain level will receive it. This creates a ladder that keeps people climbing. Members are told that the deeper teachings are too powerful or sacred for just anyone. They have to earn access through obedience, donations, or time. Each level feels like progress, but the real goal is control. The group sets the pace. The member waits and works, hoping they'll be chosen. A man joins a coaching network that promises elite training for those who commit fully. He attends weekly calls and buys the starter package. He's told that the leader holds private workshops for high performers. There's no public schedule, no clear entry point. Other members say, "You'll be invited when you're ready." This keeps him engaged. He keeps spending, keeps working, hoping to be noticed. When he's finally offered a spot, he's told there are only 5 seats left and 20 people being considered. He agrees immediately. He never finds out how many actually joined. The group may also control access to the leader. The leader becomes a symbol of wisdom, safety, or transformation, but they are rarely available. Members are told the leader is too busy, too spiritual, or too selective. This creates mystique. Even brief contact feels meaningful. A short comment, a passing glance, or a single message becomes a major event. The member believes they've been seen. They want more. The scarcity keeps the desire alive. Groups often combine false scarcity with other tactics. Urgency makes the limited access seem even more important. Indoctrination through repetition strengthens the belief that the leader or teaching is the only path. If someone hesitates, the group reminds them what's at stake. This may not come again, they say. You've been chosen for a reason. The pressure builds until the person says yes. In some systems, scarcity is tied to rank. Only those who reach a certain status gain access to key materials or events. The ranks may be based on loyalty, money, or time served. But the criteria are often vague. The group controls who moves forward and when. Members are told that promotions are earned, but in truth, they are handed out to keep people striving. One person gets access and others try harder. The group never has to explain itself. It just says, not everyone is ready. In a faith-based organization, followers are told that the leader receives messages from a divine source, but only those who attend advanced retreats get to hear these messages in full. These retreats are expensive and only announced at the last minute. Members rearrange their lives to attend. They stop asking questions. They accept the structure. The idea of hearing the leader's voice becomes more important than understanding the content. The scarcity overshadows the message. False scarcity also helps the group protect itself from criticism. If someone leaves and speaks out, the group says they weren't ready or weren't chosen. This puts the blame on the person, not the system. It tells others, that won't happen to you as long as you stay loyal. The group doesn't need to defend its teachings. It just says that some people never deserved access in the first place. Scarcity also plays on fear of rejection. Members don't want to be told they're not ready. They fear being seen as unworthy, so they work harder, they accept harder rules, they suppress doubts, they chase the next level, hoping it will finally bring peace, clarity, or love. But the group keeps the goal just out of reach. That's how control works. It uses the idea of reward to keep people in place. A young man joins a lifestyle movement that promises total freedom through a secret method. He's told that most people can't handle the truth. He takes the basic course and is told he did well. The mentor says, "You might be ready for the advanced circle." The man is thrilled. He fills out a form and waits. Weeks later, he's told there's a private call happening with just 5 new candidates. He feels chosen. He pays a large fee and joins. The call is short, vague, and disappointing, but he believes the next level will be better. He keeps going. False scarcity doesn't always look like pressure. Sometimes it looks like privilege, but it shapes behavior all the same. It tells members that value lies in access, not in understanding, that the most important things are kept behind closed doors, that only the best, the purest, the most loyal will be invited in. It creates a system where people measure worth by how close they get to the center. But the center keeps moving. The door stays just out of reach, and the group stays in control. Surveillance and peer monitoring are methods used by controlling groups to keep members in line through fear, suspicion, and constant observation. These systems don't always rely on cameras or tools. Instead, they train people to watch each other, report small mistakes, and stay alert for any signs of disloyalty. The group creates a culture where members feel they're always being watched, even if no one is around. This tactic breaks trust between people. It replaces friendship with caution. Members may smile at each other, but underneath there is fear. No one wants to be reported. No one wants to be seen as a problem. So they become careful with every word and every action. They repeat the group's phrases. They stay quiet when they disagree. They act loyal at all times, even when they feel unsure inside. A group may start with simple requests. Leaders might say, "If you see someone struggling, let us know so we can help." That sounds reasonable. But soon, the meaning shifts. Struggling becomes doubting. Helping becomes correcting. Members begin to look for signs of weakness in others. They feel responsible for keeping the group pure. Reporting someone becomes an act of devotion. In one spiritual community, members are told to confess if they notice someone skipping rituals or asking too many questions. A woman sees her friend leave a meeting early and mentions it to the leader. The next day, that friend is pulled aside and scolded. The woman didn't want to cause harm, but now she's praised for her awareness. She feels torn, but also validated. Next time, she watches even more closely. Surveillance creates layers of control. The leadership doesn't need to be present all the time. They've trained the members to do the work. People begin to edit themselves. They avoid sharing doubts, even with close friends. They fear what will happen if their words are repeated. The system turns private thoughts into potential risks. Over time, the group doesn't need to punish. Members keep themselves in check. In some groups, this behavior becomes formal. Members are assigned as buddies or accountability partners. They meet regularly to discuss progress, goals, and struggles. But these meetings often become opportunities to gather information. If one person speaks too freely, the other is expected to report it. The reports go to leadership, who then take action. These actions may be framed as support, but they are often corrections or warnings. A man in a coaching program is told to partner with another student. They check in daily and share personal challenges. One day, he says he's thinking of taking a break. He feels tired. The next morning, he gets a call from his coach. "I heard you're losing focus," the coach says. "That mindset won't get you anywhere." The man is shocked. He hadn't realized that what he shared would be passed on. Now he keeps future thoughts to himself. Peer monitoring also appears during group events. Members are encouraged to observe each other during training sessions, rituals, or outreach efforts. They are told to note who seems distracted, who skips tasks, who hesitates. These details are collected and sometimes discussed in meetings. The group praises those who notice patterns or expose non-compliance. This creates competition. People try to be the most aware, the most loyal, the most involved. In a youth-focused movement, members wear badges with progress levels. They track each other's steps in a daily log. If someone misses a checkpoint or gives the wrong answer during a session, it's noted. At the end of each week, leaders review the reports. Members who reported others are praised for their insight. Those who were reported are told to improve or face consequences. The system creates paranoia. Friendships dissolve. Everyone is a potential informant. This kind of environment changes how people think. Instead of asking, "Is this right?" members ask, "Will I get in trouble?" Instead of wondering, "Does this make sense?" they ask, "Will someone report me?" It's not about belief anymore. It's about survival. Members repeat the teachings not because they believe them, but because they're safe. That safety becomes more important than truth. Surveillance doesn't have to be active to work. Once people believe they are being watched, they act like it. They stop relaxing. They stay on guard. Even in private, they may think in the group's language. Their inner voice becomes shaped by the fear of being caught. That fear turns into habit. The group has taken control of how they behave, even when no one is around. Groups often say that peer monitoring builds accountability. They say it helps people grow, but real accountability includes trust, consent, and honesty. In these settings, there's no consent. The person being watched doesn't agree to it. They may not even know it's happening, and the goal isn't growth, it's control. The group doesn't want honest feedback. It wants loyalty without question. Sometimes the surveillance extends beyond the group space. Members are told to check on each other's social media, text habits, and personal choices. A member who skips a group event might receive several messages asking where they were. If they post something unrelated to the group, they might get a call asking why they're distracted. This blurs the line between group life and personal life. The group becomes the center of everything. A young woman joins a movement that claims to offer emotional freedom. She's told to log her daily wins in a shared chat. Other members respond with encouragement or silence. If she misses a day, she gets a private message. "Are you falling off?" the mentor asks. She didn't think missing one update mattered, but now she feels guilty. She starts posting every day, even when she has nothing to say. She doesn't want to be seen as weak. The pressure to watch and report doesn't just affect the person being watched. It changes the person doing the watching. They learn to value rules over relationships. They become more focused on order than on care. They may start to judge themselves through the same lens. If they notice a flaw in someone else and fail to report it, they feel guilty. The system traps them too. In the end, surveillance and peer monitoring build a false sense of unity. On the surface, the group looks strong and committed, but beneath that surface is fear, distance, and silence. No one feels safe, no one feels seen. Everyone performs, hoping no one notices the truth hiding behind the mask. That mask becomes a way of life, and the group doesn't need to enforce it. The members do it themselves. Distorting reality is a method used by controlling groups to confuse people about what's really happening. It takes situations that would normally be seen as harmful, abuse, exploitation, humiliation, and redefines them as positive. The group says these moments are signs of growth, tests of loyalty, or spiritual lessons. When people feel pain, the group tells them it's a gift. When they're mistreated, they're told it's part of the journey. Over time, members stop trusting their own senses. They stop believing what they feel. This tactic works by changing the meaning of discomfort. In normal life, pain tells us something is wrong. It helps us avoid danger. But when a group distorts reality, it teaches members to see pain as progress. The more something hurts, the more valuable it must be. A harsh correction is called discipline. A broken boundary is framed as a lesson in humility. A leader's cruelty is described as tough love. The worse it feels, the more the group says it's helping. Imagine a woman in a spiritual training program. One day, the leader singles her out during a group session and says she's resisting her higher self. He criticizes her in front of everyone, saying she lacks courage. She feels ashamed and confused. After the session, a senior member tells her, "That was a breakthrough moment. You should be grateful. Not everyone gets called out like that." Instead of questioning what happened, she starts to believe she was honored. The pain becomes something to cherish. This kind of reframing doesn't just defend bad behavior, it turns it into something holy. The group builds a belief system where suffering is necessary. It says that comfort is a trap, that doubt is ego, that questioning is weakness. This creates a mental loop. If you feel bad, you're doing it right. If you feel good, you're probably off track. It keeps members chasing discomfort, convinced that pain equals progress. Groups that distort reality often use complex language to confuse members. They may say that breaking the self is required for transformation, or that ego death is the only path to truth. These ideas sound deep, but they're used to justify harm. If someone speaks out, the group says they're stuck in ego. If someone leaves, they say the person wasn't ready. This keeps the group's image clean. No matter what happens, it's always the member's fault. In one business coaching group, members are pushed to work long hours, skip sleep, and attend back-to-back sessions. When someone speaks up about burnout, they're told, "This is your resistance, you're being refined." The leader says that diamonds are made under pressure, and only the weak complain. Members stop listening to their bodies. They ignore signs of mental and physical exhaustion. They don't want to be seen as soft. They believe the stress means they're on the edge of a breakthrough. Distortion can also show up in how the group explains exploitation. If a member gives large amounts of money, the group says it proves faith. If someone is asked to do unpaid labor, they're told it builds character. Sacrifice becomes a moral good. The more someone gives up time, comfort, family, savings, the more they are praised. And when they suffer, the group calls it growth. They say the old self is dying. They say the member is being purified. This makes it nearly impossible to step back and see the truth. A man gives up his job to follow a leader who claims to be a prophet. He moves into a shared house and gives the group access to his bank account. When he questions the way funds are used, the leader says, "This is your test. The universe is watching. Do you trust the path or do you cling to control?" The man feels guilty. He apologizes. He tells himself he's still learning. He stays. Over time, this system changes how people think. They stop asking, "Does this make sense?" and start asking, "What am I missing?" They no longer see mistreatment as wrong. They see it as their own failure to understand. When they feel betrayed, they think they're too attached. When they feel fear, they say it's just ego. This mental framing protects the group from criticism. Even when members are hurt, they believe the pain has a higher purpose. Groups also use distortion to control how members remember events. If If someone talks about a past incident and calls it harmful, the group responds with a new version of the story. That wasn't abuse. That was a breakthrough. You're forgetting how far you've come. You're focusing on the wrong thing. The person begins to doubt their own memory. They start to believe the group's version of events. This is a form of gaslighting. It's not just about changing facts, it's about changing the way someone sees reality. Members are also taught to watch how others respond. If someone cries during a harsh session, the group says they're releasing. If someone looks angry, they say that's the ego fighting back. All reactions are framed through the group's lens. Nothing is neutral. Everything has meaning, and the meaning always supports the group's control. A teenager in a strict discipline program is told he's lazy and selfish. He's kept awake for long hours, yelled at in front of others, and told he must break down to build back up. When he starts crying and says he wants to leave, his coach tells him, "You're finally being honest. This is what healing looks like." The teen stops resisting. He thinks he's getting better, but really, he's being broken down. Distortion also works because it isolates people from outside help. When a friend or family member says, "That doesn't sound right," the group warns that outsiders don't understand the path. They say the world is full of lies and that only the group sees the truth. This closes the feedback loop. There's no way to compare what's happening with anything else. The group defines the terms, explains the emotions, and rewrites the experience. Eventually, the member accepts that confusion is part of the process. They expect to feel off balance. They expect to feel small. They think that's what transformation looks like. And when they lose their sense of self, they call it growth. But what they've really lost is the ability to name what's being done to them. The pain is real, but the story around it is false. And in that false story, the group always wins. Trauma bonding is a method of control that uses repeated cycles of mistreatment and reward to create deep emotional ties. The person being hurt starts to feel dependent on the one causing the harm. It doesn't happen all at once. It builds slowly. The abuser shows love or care after each painful episode. This mix of fear and comfort creates confusion. The victim starts to believe the pain is part of the connection. They stay, hoping the next moment will be better. This pattern often starts with intense kindness. The person or group gives affection, praise, or attention. The new member feels seen and valued. They open up. They share private thoughts. Then the tone changes. Suddenly, there's criticism, rejection, or silence. The member doesn't understand what went wrong. They blame themselves. When affection returns, it feels like relief. That relief creates attachment. The more it happens, the stronger the bond becomes. A young man joins a mentorship program. At first, the leader gives him praise and says he has potential. They text often and have deep talks. The man feels chosen. Then, during a group call, the leader singles him out and says he's failing. The comments are sharp and public. The man feels humiliated. The next day, the leader calls and says he was testing him. "I push you because I care." The man feels special again. The pain fades. The praise now means more than before. This cycle of harm and repair becomes addictive. The member doesn't leave when things get bad. They wait for the good to come back. When it does, they feel stronger, even lucky. They believe the connection is real because it survived the low point. They think the pain was worth it. The group or leader becomes both the cause of the harm and the only source of comfort. That tension creates a strong emotional lock. Groups that use trauma bonding may say that the harsh moments are tests. They tell members, "Only the strong stay," or "This is how you grow." When someone is corrected harshly, they're told it's a gift. When they're ignored or punished, they're told it's for their own good. Then, after enough time, the group gives them praise again. The cycle resets. In a spiritual community, a woman is praised for her dedication. She's given a special role. Later, she's told she's become prideful. Her role is taken away. She's made to confess in front of others. She feels ashamed, but wants to make it right. Weeks later, the group says she has learned her lesson. She's welcomed back and hugged. That hug feels like healing. She forgets the shame and focuses on the love. These cycles can cause deep confusion. The member starts to feel like they can't trust their own feelings. They wonder if they overreacted. They doubt their memory. They think the problem is inside them. That belief keeps them from leaving. If the harm is their fault, they don't need to walk away. They just need to try harder. This shifts the blame away from the group and places it on the individual. Trauma bonding works because the human brain responds strongly to both reward and fear. When those emotions follow one another, they create intensity. The good moments feel better because of the contrast. The bad moments feel deserved because of the reward that follows. Over time, the member doesn't seek peace, they seek approval. They learn to crave the praise and fear the silence. The group has trained them to depend on emotional highs and to expect pain as part of the process. A man in a leadership circle is given the chance to speak. The group applauds. He feels important. The next week, his idea is mocked. He's told he needs to drop his ego. He's embarrassed. He almost leaves. But later, the leader says, "You handled that well. That's real growth." The man feels proud. He stays. The approval overrides the earlier pain. This method is powerful because it builds loyalty that can't be explained logically. Outsiders may ask, "Why do you stay?" But the member doesn't have a clear answer. They feel connected. They believe the group understands them. They remember the good moments and downplay the bad ones. They say things like, "It's hard sometimes, but it's worth it," or "They're strict because they care." The harm is redefined as part of the journey. Trauma bonding also isolates people. Members don't talk to outsiders about what's happening. They think others won't understand. They fear being judged or told to leave. Inside the group, they may be praised for sticking it out. They're told they've passed tests or shown strength. This praise builds pride. That pride becomes another reason to stay. Leaving would mean losing the identity they built inside the system. In a high-intensity workshop, a woman breaks down in tears after being pushed by the facilitator. The group surrounds her, hugs her, and calls it a breakthrough. She feels overwhelmed but accepted. She thinks this must be growth. Later, she learns to stay quiet when she feels hurt. If she speaks up, she risks being told she's resisting change. She learns to label pain as healing and silence as strength. The person caught in trauma bonding doesn't see the harm clearly. They see the whole experience as a test of faith, a path to something higher. They believe the bond with the group or leader is unique. They tell themselves that the process is tough but necessary. They forget that real growth doesn't require pain to prove value. They've been taught that love comes through struggle and that loyalty means staying no matter what. When trauma bonding is in place, the group no longer needs strong arguments. They don't need evidence or logic. They only need the next emotional turn. A small act of praise after pain keeps the member in place. That shift creates the illusion of progress. The person thinks they're moving forward, but they're stuck in a loop. The pattern keeps repeating. Affection, withdrawal, correction, praise. Each time the emotional bond grows tighter. The person stops asking if the group is healthy. They only ask if they're doing enough to be seen again. The group becomes the judge of worth, the source of pain, and the place of relief. And the person, caught between fear and hope, stays. Not because they're blind, but because the bond feels too strong to break. Creating a closed system of logic is a method used by controlling groups to protect their beliefs from challenge. It works by twisting every outcome, good or bad, into proof that the group is right. If something succeeds, the group takes credit. If something fails, the member is blamed. There is no room for outside ideas or alternative explanations. Every question leads back to the same answer: trust the system. In a closed system, the group defines all the terms. It sets the rules for what counts as success, failure, truth, or doubt. Then it controls how people interpret their experiences. If a member gets a result the group wanted, that's called progress. If they don't, they're told they didn't try hard enough, didn't believe enough, or weren't ready. The group itself is never at fault. The system becomes self-sealing. It explains everything and proves nothing. Imagine someone joins a self-help group that promises financial freedom. The leader gives a formula and says it works if followed exactly. The member tries it and sees no results. When they raise concerns, the group responds with, "You must have held back," or "You're still thinking like a poor person." The member starts to doubt themselves instead of the method. They try again. When it fails again, they're told, "You need to trust more." This continues until the person either gives up completely or doubles down. convinced that the failure was their fault. This type of thinking blocks honest reflection. The member doesn't get to ask, "Does this method work?" Instead, they're trained to ask, "What's wrong with me?" The group offers endless explanations that protect the system and attack the self. This keeps members from comparing the group's teachings with real-world outcomes. They're taught that logic from outside can't apply. Only the group's logic is valid. A closed system often uses slogans to shut down thought. Sayings like, "Everything happens for a reason," or "You create your own reality," become catch-all explanations. If someone questions the leader, they're told, "That's your ego talking." If they feel doubt, they're told, "That's a test of faith." No matter what the person feels or sees, the group reframes it to fit the message. Over time, the person stops questioning. They assume the group knows better. In one spiritual circle, members are told that illness is caused by negative energy. If someone gets sick, they are blamed for it. "You attracted this," the group says. "You're not aligned." Even when a member follows all the group's advice, diet, meditation, affirmations, and still ends up in the hospital, the response is the same. "You must have had hidden resistance." The system never considers that the teaching might be wrong. It can only turn the blame inward. This kind of structure also blocks feedback. If someone points out a contradiction or asks for evidence, they are accused of doubt or negativity. The group says that real truth lies beyond reason, that only those who surrender completely will understand. This claim removes the need for proof. The more confused a person feels, the more they're told to let go of logic. The harder something is to understand, the more sacred it's said to be. Groups often use stories of others who succeeded to back up their claims. These stories are repeated often, even if they're vague or unverified. If someone fails, they're treated as a warning, not a data point. The message becomes clear: believe fully or fail alone. This keeps people silent. They don't want to admit struggle, because struggle gets framed as weakness. In a business mentorship program, participants are told that success comes from mindset alone. The leader shares stories of members who became wealthy after changing their beliefs. One man tries everything but sees no change. When he speaks up, he's told, "Your energy is off." No one asks about market trends, pricing, or strategy. Those don't fit the model. The system can't be wrong, so the member must be. He stays quiet after that. Closed systems also protect the leader. If the leader makes a bad prediction, it's reframed. "You misunderstood the timing," they say. "It happened on a spiritual level." If a teaching changes, they say it evolved. If the leader acts cruelly, they say it's a test or a lesson. The leader becomes untouchable. The group adjusts reality to keep the image intact. A woman follows a wellness influencer who claims to channel divine messages. One week, the message says a major global shift will happen. Nothing changes. When the woman asks about it, she's told, "The shift was inside you. You just missed it." She accepts this. She wants to stay aligned. Over time, she stops questioning predictions. She believes that if she doesn't see results, it's because she's not ready. In these systems, there's no clear way to leave without being wrong. If someone walks away, the group says they weren't strong enough. If someone speaks out, they're labeled bitter or broken. The group says only those who stay are worthy. This creates a trap. The only way to prove your value is to stay. Leaving is failure by default. Members caught in closed systems often blame themselves for a long time. They try harder, give more, and follow every rule. They believe that if they struggle, it's because they're not pure enough or committed enough. This creates stress, guilt, and shame. But it also creates loyalty. They keep trying because they believe the problem is them, not the system. Eventually, some people begin to notice the pattern. They see that no matter what happens, the answer is always the same. They see that the system never changes, even when reality does. That's when the spell starts to break. But even then, it's hard to leave. The closed logic has shaped how they think. They must learn to ask new questions. They must learn to trust what they see. A healthy system allows doubt, welcomes evidence, and adjusts when things don't work. A closed system does the opposite. It replaces thinking with rules. It turns questions into threats. It teaches people to ignore what they feel and to follow what they're told. And it keeps them there, trapped by logic that only works if you never stop to test it. Humiliation and degradation are tools that controlling groups use to break down a person's sense of self. They do this on purpose. The goal is not just to correct behavior or challenge ego. It's to destroy confidence, isolate identity, and then rebuild the person into a version that reflects the group's values. This process is slow but effective. It works by chipping away at dignity until the member no longer trusts their own thoughts, memories, or instincts. Once that trust is gone, the person will look to the group for approval, direction, and even permission to think or feel. At first, the pressure is small. A group might comment on how someone talks, dresses, or carries themselves. They say it with a smile or under the banner of self-improvement. "You still carry too much pride," they might say, or "that laugh isn't spiritual." These comments sound like advice, but they create doubt. The person starts to question how they come across. They wonder if they're doing something wrong. Soon they wait for the group to tell them what's acceptable. That doubt grows as the feedback gets sharper. The group may begin to mock a member during meetings. They might ask invasive questions and then laugh at the answers. The member is told they are too soft, too emotional, too rigid, or too shallow. These judgments are not random. They're targeted to make the person feel ashamed of who they are. The group frames this as necessary. "This is how we get to the truth," they say. The ego must be crushed. Imagine a woman joins a group that promises healing. In the first few sessions, the leader praises her energy. But later, during a group process, he points at her and says, "You still think you're special. You're not. You're broken like the rest of us." The group nods. She feels exposed. Her instinct is to walk out, but no one else reacts. She thinks, maybe he's right. After the session, someone hugs her and says, "You're brave. That was beautiful." The humiliation gets reframed as growth. She stays. These attacks don't always happen in private. Public humiliation is a key part of the process. When a person is shamed in front of others, the impact is deeper. They feel isolated and watched. The group learns what happens to those who step out of line. The individual feels pressure to conform, not just to the leader's voice, but to the reactions of their peers. This creates a culture of silence. No one wants to be next. In one organization, members must share personal failures during weekly meetings. If they leave out details, they're accused of hiding. If they cry, they're told it's drama. If they stay quiet, they're called resistant. No answer is ever enough. Eventually, people learn to confess more and more, even when it's painful. The more they share, the more the group says they're making progress. But what's really happening is erosion. Their private life becomes public property. Their boundaries are gone. Leaders use humiliation to assert dominance. They position themselves as the only one who can see clearly. When a member resists or questions, they're put down hard. Their thoughts are called immature. Their emotions are labeled as manipulation. If they try to explain themselves, the group interrupts or laughs. Each time this happens, the person's voice shrinks. They begin to believe they can't be trusted, not just by others, but by themselves. A man in a high-demand training program asks the facilitator why a certain rule exists. The room goes silent. The leader turns to him and says, "That question proves how limited your thinking still is." He turns to the group and says, "This is what ego looks like." Everyone stares. The man feels ashamed. He doesn't ask anything else for the rest of the weekend. When he's later praised for opening up, he doesn't even notice that it started with being shut down. The group doesn't always keep the pressure high. Often, humiliation is followed by comfort. After a breakdown, someone might step in and offer kind words. "I've been where you are," they say. "Keep going." This mix of shame and support is powerful. The person begins to associate pain with progress. They believe that only by breaking can they grow. So when the next attack comes, they accept it. They may even welcome it. Over time, members start to humiliate themselves. They share stories that expose their worst fears. They use the group's language to criticize themselves. "I was so arrogant," they say. "I finally saw how selfish I've been." These statements win approval. The more harshly they speak about themselves, the more others praise their honesty. This reinforces the idea that worth comes through self-degradation. The lower they go, the more accepted they become. Some groups use dress codes, titles, or roles to reinforce hierarchy. A person may be told to wear plain clothes, shave their head, or give up makeup or jewelry. They're told this removes vanity, but it also removes identity. Others might be given a humiliating task or label. You're the lowest rank now, they're told. Prove you can grow. These acts strip people of confidence. They learn to obey, not from respect, but from fear of being shamed again. The person who stays in this environment too long begins to accept the group's version of who they are. They stop defending themselves. They forget what they liked, what they wanted, what they believed before they joined. They don't laugh the same way. They don't stand the same way. They look around before they speak, wondering if what they say will be approved. They call this maturity, but it's not growth, it's compliance. In the worst cases, people internalize the humiliation. Even when they leave, the group's voice stays in their mind. They hear the words over and over. You're not ready. You're too emotional. You're nothing without us. It takes time to unlearn that voice. It takes even longer to build a new one. Because the old one was built through fear, through shame, and through the slow destruction of everything they once believed about themselves. Identity erasure is a method of control that works by cutting people off from who they were before joining the group. The group doesn't always demand this change directly. Instead, it guides the person to give up old habits, past interests, personal goals, and even their name. The process feels like growth at first. Members are told they're shedding ego, letting go of limits, or starting fresh. But what's really happening is the slow removal of their sense of self. The person becomes easier to control because they no longer carry an internal compass. The group becomes the source of identity. The change often starts with language. A person joins a group and is invited to take a new name. This is presented as symbolic, a mark of transformation, a break from the past. They're told their old name holds pain or illusion. The new name reflects their true self. But once the new name is in place, something subtle shifts. The group uses it all the time. The old name disappears. Family and friends still use the old name, but it starts to sound distant. Over time, the member feels uncomfortable hearing it. It no longer fits. In a spiritual retreat, a woman named Lisa is given the name Amara. She's told this is her soul name. Everyone in the group begins to call her Amara, even in casual conversation. When her sister visits and calls her Lisa, the group looks at her like she's made a mistake. Lisa smiles, but she feels the tension. Later, a senior member says, Lisa was the one who suffered. Amara is the one who's free. Lisa begins to let go of more than her name. She stops calling her sister. She deletes old photos. She doesn't realize it yet, but her former life is already fading. Uniformity also plays a role. Some groups ask members to dress alike. They might wear similar colors, plain clothes, or even robes. This is said to reduce distraction or promote unity, but it also strips away expression. Personal style disappears. No one wears shirts from bands they liked. No one shows signs of hobbies, sports teams, or other outside interests. When everyone looks the same, it's easier to forget who you were. Individuality becomes selfish. Uniformity becomes virtue. In a leadership collective, new recruits are given a dress code. Neutral tones, clean lines, nothing flashy. They're told it helps maintain focus. A man who used to love vintage jackets gives them away. His friends notice he looks different, more serious. When they ask why, he says it's part of becoming a better version of himself. He doesn't see it as a loss. He thinks he's evolving. But the truth is, the group is replacing his image with one they approve. Hobbies, interests, and family traditions are also targeted. The group might say, that was the old you, or those things no longer serve your growth. If a member played guitar, wrote poetry, or enjoyed hiking, those activities might be called distractions. At first, the person tries to balance both lives, but soon the group's schedule fills every hour. Weekly meetings, special sessions, extra study time. There's no room left. The past slips away through neglect. A woman used to paint in her free time. After joining a coaching group, she's told that creative outlets are a form of avoidance. You should be building your vision, the leader says. She puts down the brush. Her weekends are now full of group calls and personal challenges. She tells herself the painting was just a hobby, but deep down, it was how she understood herself. Without it, she feels dull. But she smiles more, says the right words, and is told she's becoming clear. The group doesn't always ask people to reject their past openly. Instead, they encourage distance. Members are told that outsiders won't understand, that family members still caught in the old mindset may pull them backward. Phone calls to parents become shorter. Messages to old friends go unanswered. The member begins to feel like no one outside the group gets them. Inside, they feel supported. The group praises them for being strong, for walking a higher path. One man used to visit his parents every Sunday. After joining a men's circle focused on power and purpose, he starts missing dinners. He's told that family routines often come from guilt, not love. "You're not their child anymore," his mentor says. "You're your own man." He stops going. His parents are confused. He tells them he's growing, but the truth is he's letting go of who he was, the son who showed up, cracked jokes, and helped with groceries. The group has made him see that person as weak. The change is slow, which makes it harder to notice. Each step feels like a personal choice. But over time, the person becomes harder to recognize. They speak in the group's language, they follow its rules, they defend its ideas. They've stopped asking, "What do I want?" and now ask, "What would the group say?" The person might believe they've never been clearer, but they've simply replaced their old self with a group-approved identity. Members who resist this shift are seen as stuck. If someone keeps using their birth name, wears old clothes, or talks about the past, they're corrected. "That's not who you are anymore," someone says. "Let it go." The group sees identity as a block to growth, but in reality, they are removing what makes each person whole. When everyone thinks, talks, and looks the same, control is easy. Sometimes the group gives roles that become identities. A person becomes the listener, the warrior, or the seeker. These labels sound empowering, but they limit how people act. If someone steps outside their role, the group calls it confusion. A person who questions too much is told they're breaking trust. A person who tries to reconnect with old friends is told they're regressing. These responses teach members to stay in line. When a member leaves, the cost becomes clear. They try to return to old spaces, but they feel lost. The clothes they once wore feel strange. Their voice sounds different. They hesitate when people use their real name. Friends say they've changed. The person agrees but can't explain how. That's the damage. It's not just the time spent in the group, it's the part of themselves they gave up. The version of them that told jokes, made art, loved certain songs, or danced without thinking is gone. In its place is a copy shaped by someone else's plan. Identity erasure isn't about growth, it's about replacement. The group doesn't want stronger individuals, it wants loyal mirrors. And the easiest way to create those mirrors is to wipe away the original image piece by piece until all that's left is the version that fits. Sacred science is a method used by controlling groups to make their teachings seem untouchable. They present the leader's words or the group's beliefs as absolute truth. These teachings are said to be beyond normal questioning because they come from a higher place, divine wisdom, spiritual awakening, or cutting-edge science. Once the idea is in place, the group doesn't have to defend anything. If you question the teaching, you're not just wrong. You're blind, arrogant, or spiritually unready. The group builds a wall around its beliefs. It fills that wall with language that sounds official, deep, or advanced. If the group leans spiritual, it says the teachings are channeled from a higher realm. If it leans scientific, it throws in complex terms, graphs, or vague references to research. The effect is the same. Members hear something they don't understand and assume that means it must be true. They stop asking for evidence. They stop comparing ideas. The leader becomes the source of all answers. In one wellness program, the founder says their methods align with ancient knowledge and modern quantum physics. They use terms like vibration, frequency, and cellular memory. These words are mixed with personal stories and emotional appeals. When a member asks what the terms mean, they're told, "You're not there yet. Just stay open." The message is clear. Doubt comes from a lack of understanding, not from anything wrong with the teaching. The member falls silent. They try to believe harder. This pattern shows up in many types of groups. In some, the leader is said to receive divine messages. In others, the leader claims to have discovered a truth that scientists, doctors, or teachers have missed. They may say traditional systems are broken and only their method works. Once members accept that, they follow without resistance. They believe they've found something rare and powerful. Questioning feels like betrayal. Sacred science removes the need for proof. The group says, we don't need outside sources, we have the truth. When someone asks for studies or examples, the answer is often vague. You'll feel it when you're ready, or the data exists, but you have to experience it first. This creates a loop. You can't understand the teaching until you believe it. But once you believe it, you stop asking if it's true. A man joins a financial coaching network. The leader says their method is based on universal laws. They talk about flow, energy, and alignment. The terms aren't clearly defined, but they sound real. The leader says wealthy people have always known this, and now the group has access to it. The man listens, takes notes, and pays for more sessions. When he struggles to see results, he's told he must not be aligned yet. The teaching remains untouched. The blame lands on him. Groups that use sacred science often discourage outside information. They say other sources are contaminated by bias, fear, or low awareness. If a member reads something that contradicts the teaching, they're warned. Be careful, that's a test, or that's old thinking trying to pull you back. This creates a closed system. The group defines the truth, controls the language, and sets the standard for what counts as knowledge. Anything outside is seen as false, no matter how well supported. In a healing retreat, the leader says the human body stores trauma in energy fields. They introduce a method of clearing these blocks through hand movements and sounds. The group calls it light medicine. When a participant says their pain hasn't changed, they're told the work is happening on a higher level. They're warned not to speak doubt, or it will undo the healing. Over time, they stop tracking progress. They just keep attending. The method cannot fail because any failure is blamed on the person receiving it. This tactic makes the leader seem more than human. They aren't just wise, they're chosen, gifted, or awakened. Members don't see them as someone with ideas. They see them as a vessel of truth. That view makes it hard to say no. If the leader makes a mistake, members explain it away. You misunderstood, or it's part of the process. If the leader changes their teaching, it's not called a contradiction, it's called an evolution. The leader stays untouchable. People drawn to these groups often feel confused in the beginning. The language is dense, the rules don't quite make sense, but everyone else seems convinced. That creates pressure. Members pretend to understand so they don't seem behind. They copy the words, the tone, the belief system. They say things like, "It took me a while, but now I get it," even when they don't. Over time, the language becomes normal. The belief becomes habit. In some groups, members are told that logic itself is the enemy. They're told that the mind will block the truth. That reason is part of the old world. They must surrender to the experience. Once that belief takes hold, it becomes risky to think too hard. If you have a question, you're told to meditate on it. If you see a flaw, you're told it's your ego. The structure shuts down every path but one: accept and follow. Children raised in these groups are taught the system early. They memorize the terms, repeat the ideas, and fear the outside world. They aren't given tools to question. If they ask hard questions, they're punished or ignored. They learn that faith is more important than facts, that loyalty is safer than curiosity. By the time they're old enough to wonder, they don't know how to think in any other way. Sacred science doesn't just defend ideas, it turns them into weapons. The group says, "This is truth. Everything else is wrong." That claim cuts off doubt. It silences dissent. It makes people stay even when they feel unsure. Because if they leave, they fear they're walking away from truth itself. The language may change, but the structure stays the same. A guru might speak of awakening. A coach might speak of alignment. A prophet might speak of revelation. But all of them say the same thing: I know, and you don't. The person hears this and thinks, if I want to know, I have to stay. And so they do, not because they've seen the truth, but because they've been told they'll never find it anywhere else. Denial of privacy is a method of control that works by making time alone feel wrong or even dangerous. It starts with the group encouraging togetherness. They say community brings healing, clarity, or safety. But soon it becomes something else. Time alone is discouraged, and privacy is treated as isolation or resistance. The message is clear. If you need space, something must be wrong with you. Over time, members lose the ability to think, reflect, or rest without the group present. Their identity becomes tied to the system. They stop existing as individuals. This tactic doesn't always start with a rule. It begins with a shift in values. A member joins a group and is praised for showing up often. They're encouraged to attend every meeting, every study session, every event. At first, it feels like support. But when they miss a gathering to be alone, the tone changes. A leader might say, "You're pulling back." That's not healthy. Another member might ask, "Why don't you want to grow with us?" The pressure is quiet but steady. The person returns, not because they want to, but because they feel guilty for needing space. The structure of the group supports this shift. Days are filled with meetings, group work, shared meals, and check-ins. Schedules are packed from morning to night. Even breaks involve conversations about teachings or goals. There's no time to step away. The person starts waking up with the group, thinking with the group, and going to sleep under the group's watch. They forget what it feels like to be alone with their own thoughts. A young woman joins a healing retreat that lasts a month. She shares a room with 3 others. Meals are eaten in silence, but always together. Every morning starts with group meditation. Every evening ends with group reflection. When she asks to take a walk by herself, a facilitator walks with her. She stops asking. After 2 weeks, she starts to feel panicked in quiet moments. She's used to being surrounded by others. When she leaves the retreat, she struggles to sleep in silence. In high-demand groups, time alone is seen as dangerous. Leaders may say that solitude opens the door to doubt, ego, or low vibrations. They teach that only in the group is there truth or safety. This fear sinks in fast. A member starts to feel anxious when left alone. Their mind races. They wonder if they're slipping. They seek out the group to feel normal again. What used to be rest now feels like risk. Some groups use spiritual language to justify the lack of privacy. They say that isolation is a sign of spiritual blockage, that a person who truly wants to grow will always seek the group. They twist natural needs into signs of weakness. If someone needs time to think or process, they're told they're avoiding truth. "Why would you want to be alone?" the group asks. "Are you hiding something?" That question plants shame. This environment also affects how people relate to each other. Members begin to watch one another. They notice who pulls back, who skips events, who stays quiet during group time. If someone steps away, the group checks in, not always with concern, but with suspicion. Members might say, "We're just worried," but the real message is, "You're drifting." To avoid this, people stop asking for time. They show up, even when exhausted. They pretend to be engaged. They perform loyalty to stay safe. In a coaching program, clients are added to a group chat that's active all day. They're expected to check in every morning, share wins during the day, and post reflections each night. When someone stops responding for a few hours, a mentor messages them directly. "Are you still committed?" they ask. The client wasn't doing anything wrong. They just wanted to take a break, but now they feel guilty. They post again, more often, to prove they're still in. Denial of privacy also shows up in living arrangements. Some groups have shared housing where members eat, sleep, and work together. There's no personal space. Rooms are shared. Doors stay open. Phones or journals may be checked by leaders or peers. Members are told that openness builds trust. But without private time, people lose the ability to sort through their own thoughts. Every reaction is filtered through the group's expectations. One man joins a brotherhood that offers transformation through discipline. He moves into a shared house. He's told that privacy is a luxury of the weak, that only those with something to hide need time alone. His phone is placed in a shared drawer each night. His journal is read aloud during group sessions. At first, he feels exposed, but alive. After a few months, he starts to feel hollow. He doesn't know what he really thinks anymore, only what he's supposed to say. Even in groups that don't control housing, they may track how members use their time. Members are expected to report on their day, share personal goals, and be visible in group spaces. If someone spends time away, the group may accuse them of slacking. The pressure to always be connected builds until the member starts to think that stepping away means falling behind. Children raised in these settings often grow up without private space. They're encouraged to share their thoughts with adults and peers at all times. They are taught that personal boundaries are selfish, that needing quiet time means they are rebellious. As they get older, they struggle to develop a sense of self. They don't learn to reflect. They learn to report. When they leave the group, they may feel lost without constant feedback. Denial of privacy makes the group feel essential. The member forgets how to process emotions without input. They lose the ability to tell the difference between their true thoughts and the ones shaped by group approval. The constant presence of others acts as a mirror, showing them how to behave, what to feel, and when to speak. Without alone time, that mirror never drops, and the person forgets they even had another face. Eventually, needing privacy becomes something to hide. A person may sneak time alone, feeling ashamed or afraid. They may go for walks without telling anyone, or stay in the bathroom just to breathe. These moments are brief and filled with tension. They're afraid of being caught, not for doing something wrong, but for doing something normal. And that fear shows just how deep the control has gone. The denial of privacy is not just about time, it's about ownership of the mind. When people can't be alone, they can't think freely. They rely on the group to know what's true, what's right, and who they are. The group becomes their silence, their reflection, their sense of peace. And once that happens, the person forgets how to hear their own voice without someone else telling them what it means. Emotional overwhelm is a method of control that uses strong feelings to override thought. The goal is to flood the members' senses, mentally, physically, and emotionally, until they stop questioning what's happening. Groups use music, chanting, touch, storytelling, crying, shouting, or sudden silence to stir emotion. The emotional wave is treated as proof that the experience is meaningful. Once the person feels something deep, they assume the group's message must be true. This technique doesn't rely on logic. It relies on sensation. The person is moved, often to tears or laughter, and that response is then used to show that the teaching is working. The leader may say, "You're finally opening," or "This is the shift." But what's really happening is that the person has been placed in a high-intensity setting where they can't keep up with what's being said. Their guard drops. They go along, not because they agree, but because they feel overwhelmed. A man joins a personal breakthrough seminar. The room is dark. Loud music plays. People dance, cry, and hug strangers. The leader tells dramatic stories about pain, purpose, and awakening. People around him are sobbing. He feels something stir inside, grief, maybe, or guilt. The leader points to him and says, "You're ready to break free." The man nods. He doesn't fully understand what he's agreeing to, but the emotion is so strong that he assumes it must mean something true. These moments are crafted carefully. The group creates highs and lows on purpose. They use rhythm and repetition. They build up with a speech, crash it with a dramatic pause, and bring it back with a group chant or song. The member's body reacts first, heart racing, breath changing, maybe tears. The mind follows. The person loses track of time. The outside world fades. They feel connected to something larger. The leader names that feeling: truth, purpose, awakening, transformation. The person accepts it. Emotional overwhelm is not always loud. It can come through silence, stillness, or long periods of focused attention. In a spiritual circle, the group sits in silence for 30 minutes. No one moves. The air feels heavy. Someone begins to cry. Another laughs quietly. The leader stands and whispers, "This is the release." The room stays quiet. The moment feels sacred. But it's not about insight, it's about pressure. When silence lasts long enough, it changes how the brain works. Time stretches. Boundaries blur. What's left is emotion. Some groups use touch or closeness. In a healing workshop, members are told to hold hands, look into each other's eyes, and repeat affirmations. A person who barely knows the group finds themselves crying in someone's arms. The leader says, "You're opening." But what really happened is that the person was placed in a situation where vulnerability felt required. Their emotions rose because the setting allowed no escape. That intensity is now tied to the group. This method also works through confession. A leader might ask someone to speak about a painful memory. Others gather around, nod, weep, or echo phrases like, "We see you." The person shares more. At the peak of emotion, the leader affirms the group's message. This is what freedom feels like. In that moment, the member is too raw to question anything. They agree not because the logic is strong, but because they've been cracked open. Groups may repeat this cycle. They bring members to emotional highs and lows several times a day. Joy, grief, anger, and love all get triggered in rapid succession. The person becomes dependent on the group to help them process these feelings. Outside life starts to feel dull or fake. The only time they feel truly alive is during a session. That need for intensity keeps them coming back. They confuse emotion with meaning, and the group becomes the only source of both. In one coaching community, members meet 3 times a week for deep sharing. The leader guides them through breathing exercises, visualization, and storytelling. The mood swings from laughter to sobbing to silence. After 2 hours, no one remembers the steps that were taught. They only remember how they felt. The leader says, "That's the real work." Members sign up for the next program, chasing that feeling again. This emotional roller coaster also weakens resistance. A person who's been crying for an hour is less likely to argue or think critically. They are tired, open, and exposed. If a financial request or a major life choice is introduced at that point, they are more likely to agree. They think the emotion is a sign that they're ready. In truth, they're just overwhelmed. Groups that use this method often discourage people from talking about the experience later in plain terms. If someone says, "That felt intense," they're corrected. "It was powerful," the leader insists. This keeps the emotional memory tied to the group's framing. The person learns to speak about feelings using group-approved words. Over time, they stop describing things in their own way. Outside the group, the person struggles to explain what happened. They say things like, "You had to be there," or "It changed me." But when pressed, they can't describe what they learned, only how they felt. That's a sign of emotional overwhelm. The experience was powerful, but not clear. The emotion was real, but the message got in without being tested. This method doesn't just create loyalty, it creates dependence. The person begins to think they need the group to feel anything deep. They stop trusting their own inner life. Regular moments of peace or sadness no longer feel valid. They crave the highs and lows that only the group can deliver. Without them, life feels flat. The group knows this. They build more events, more sessions, more content. Each one promises a deeper shift, a bigger release, but the real shift never comes. Only more emotion, more reaction, more surrender. The person stays, not because they're learning, but because they want to feel something again. Emotion has replaced understanding, and the group has become the only place where that emotion feels safe. Emotional overwhelm works because it bypasses thinking. It makes people vulnerable without looking violent. It looks like healing, but it's a form of control. The group sets the pace, defines the meaning, and uses emotion as proof. Once a person feels enough, they believe. And once they believe, the group no longer needs to convince them. The emotion did the work. Relentless demand for loyalty is a control tactic that makes obedience the main measure of a person's value. In groups that use this method, loyalty is not just expected, it's treated as a moral obligation. Members are taught that questioning the leader, the group, or the rules means they are weak, lost, or even dangerous. Doubt becomes shameful. Disagreement becomes betrayal. Over time, people learn to suppress their thoughts, nod along, and treat loyalty as a form of purity. At first, the group may frame loyalty as commitment. Members are praised for showing up, following through, and supporting others. That sounds reasonable, but then the praise shifts. The most loyal members are not just consistent, they are silent when things don't make sense. They never push back. They repeat the group's beliefs without hesitation. The leader holds them up as examples. Others follow, not because they agree, but because they want to be seen as strong. A man joins a business mentorship group. In the beginning, he's told to trust the process. When he brings up a concern about the strategy, his mentor frowns. "Sounds like you're not ready," the mentor says. In the next session, the group discusses mindset blocks. One member is called out for questioning the path. The man hears this and stays quiet. He doesn't want to be next. He starts to agree in meetings even when he feels uncertain. He's not growing, he's performing. The leader becomes the symbol of loyalty. They are positioned as someone who sees further, knows more, and never makes mistakes. Their past is framed as heroic. Their success becomes evidence of their insight. Members are told that true belief means trusting the leader fully. If you question the leader's actions, you're seen as doubting the mission. If you challenge a teaching, you're told you're creating division. In a spiritual collective, members are taught that the leader channels divine truth. One day, a woman asks why a practice was changed without explanation. The room gets quiet. The leader looks at her and says, "You still think you know better." She apologizes. After the meeting, no one speaks to her. She's told to reflect in silence until she's clear. She doesn't speak up again. She learns that loyalty means keeping questions to herself. These environments treat obedience as growth. When someone follows without hesitation, they're said to be advanced, awakened, or aligned. When someone hesitates, they're told they have a blockage, fear, or unresolved trauma. This framing keeps members from trusting their judgment. They stop asking if the group makes sense and start asking what's wrong with them. That shift keeps the group above criticism. The group also rewrites mistakes. If a plan fails or a promise falls short, members are told the failure came from a lack of faith. "You didn't believe hard enough," the leader says. If someone gets sick or burned out, they're told their energy was off. The teaching is never questioned. The member always takes the blame. The only way to fix things is to recommit, show up more, and let go of doubt. Loyalty is often tested. The group may ask members to speak out in support of the leader or to defend the group against outsiders. If someone hesitates, they're seen as unsteady. If they defend the group loudly, they are praised. This creates pressure to take sides. The member learns that survival depends on being visibly loyal. Private doubts are no longer private. They must be covered with performance. In a youth empowerment program, participants are asked to post testimonials on social media about how much the group changed their life. One person doesn't post. The next day, they're asked why. They say they're still thinking it through. A staff member says, "You're either all in or you're not." The message spreads. The person posts a long, glowing review that night, not because they believe it fully, but because they don't want to lose their place. The group may also reward those who expose disloyalty. Members are encouraged to report others who express doubt, skip meetings, or ask hard questions. Reporting becomes a way to prove loyalty. "You're protecting the space," the group says. This creates an environment where no one feels safe. People monitor each other. They speak in approved phrases. Real conversations disappear. Eventually, members internalize the demand. They no longer need the leader to correct them. They do it themselves. They scan their minds for any sign of doubt. If they find it, they push it down. If it lingers, they confess it as a weakness. They seek reassurance from the group, hoping to be told they're still good, still loyal, still worthy. A woman in a leadership circle finds herself questioning a new rule. She writes a message to her mentor, then deletes it. She rewords it 3 times to sound less critical. Finally, she says nothing. She goes to the meeting and acts supportive. She tells herself the doubt was ego. She journals about trust and commitment. She doesn't realize she's erased her voice to fit the group's mold. In some cases, the group redefines loyalty as sacrifice. Members are asked to give more money, more time, or more effort to prove they're committed. If someone hesitates, they're told they're not invested. If they say they're tired or overwhelmed, they're told to push through. Rest becomes disloyalty. Questioning becomes selfish. Anything that pulls the person away from the group becomes suspect. The group may even frame leaving as betrayal. If someone walks away, they're said to have failed. Members are told not to speak to them. The person becomes a warning. They couldn't handle it, the leader says. They chose the easy way. This keeps current members quiet. They don't want to be next. They double down. They stay close. They call that closeness strength. Over time, the person's worth becomes tied to their obedience. They no longer ask, "What do I believe?" They ask, "Am I loyal enough?" They try to guess what the leader would want. They pre-correct their thoughts. They filter their feelings. They give up pieces of themselves to stay accepted. The group doesn't need to control every move. It has already shaped how the person sees themselves. This is how relentless loyalty works. It turns obedience into virtue. It turns doubt into sin. And it teaches people that their value doesn't come from who they are. It comes from how well they serve. Gradual commitment is a method of influence that works by starting small. A a group or leader asks for something easy, a favor, a short meeting, a few dollars. It seems harmless. Most people agree without much thought. But once someone agrees, the next request comes. It's just a bit bigger. Then another, then another. By the time the requests become costly or extreme, the person has already said yes so many times that saying no feels unnatural. They look back and think, I've come this far. I can't stop now. This process is also called the foot in the door technique. The idea is that once the door opens even a crack, it gets harder to close. Every small step builds momentum. Each choice makes the next one feel more logical. People want to stay consistent. They don't want to admit they might have made a mistake. So they commit more, give more, and sacrifice more, even when they start to feel unsure. A woman joins a weekend wellness retreat. She pays a small fee. She likes the energy. At the end of the weekend, she's invited to a 6-week course. The leader says, "You've already started. Why stop now?" She signs up. In the course, she's asked to journal, share personal stories, and do simple daily exercises. Nothing too heavy. Then, the group begins asking for deeper vulnerability. More time, more focus. When she hesitates, they say, "You've already done the work. Don't back out now." She keeps going. The requests become more personal. Attend weekly calls. Join a private group chat. Post online about your journey. Each step is framed as growth. When she resists, the group reminds her of how far she's come. The old you would have quit, they say. She agrees. She doesn't want to be the old version of herself. She pushes forward. Gradual commitment works well because it hides the full cost at the start. No one would agree to give up their savings, cut off old friends, or stay in a group for years if asked on day one. But if the journey begins with a short quiz, a friendly call, or a few dollars, it feels like a small risk. Then the stakes increase slowly. The person adjusts to each new level. They don't notice how far they've moved from their starting point. This technique also builds emotional ties. Early on, the group offers praise for each small step. "You're doing great," they say. "You're one of the brave ones." That praise feels good. The person begins to link commitment with approval. If they pause or pull back, the praise stops. Or worse, the group shows disappointment. "I thought you were serious," someone says. The person feels ashamed. To avoid that shame, they go further. In one leadership program, new members are asked to attend a free webinar. At the end, they're offered a discounted course. After joining, they're encouraged to attend a retreat. Then they're invited to become mentors. At each stage, they're told they're rising, growing, unlocking new levels. But each step comes with more pressure, more cost, and more control. By the time someone questions the system, they've already invested months and thousands of dollars. They tell themselves it has to be worth it. Gradual commitment also changes how people see themselves. A person who once saw their identity as flexible now sees it through the group's lens. "I'm part of this now," they think. "This is who I am." That self-image makes it harder to leave. Leaving doesn't just mean walking away from a program. It means admitting that the choices they made might not have served them. That thought is painful. Many choose to stay instead. Leaders and recruiters know how this works. They design the process carefully. The early steps feel light, fun, or social. Nothing feels binding. But each stage builds trust, dependence, and a sense of duty. Eventually, the person is tied to the group emotionally, socially, and financially. Walking away feels like betrayal, not just of the group, but of themselves. A man attends a men's circle for personal growth. The first session is free. He's told to bring an open mind. He enjoys the conversation and comes back the next week. Soon he's asked to lead a small breakout group. He's honored. Then he's asked to give a talk, then organize an event, then pay for a leadership retreat. Each step feels like a reward. He doesn't notice that he hasn't had time to reflect or say no. Sometimes the steps are tied to identity shifts. Members are told that saying yes means they're strong, committed, or awakened. Saying no means they're stuck, fearful, or small. That framing makes refusal feel like regression. People don't want to lose status or fall behind. They agree, not because they're ready, but because they don't want to be seen as weak. In cultic groups, this method can lead to extreme outcomes. A person starts by attending meetings. Then they're asked to move in. Then they're asked to cut off family. Then they're asked to give up their job. Each decision feels like the next step in a journey. By the time they're isolated and dependent, they barely recognize the person they were. They can't point to a single moment when things changed. It happens slowly, gradually. Each yes led to the next. This process makes people feel responsible for their own entrapment. No one forced me, they say. I chose this. But they didn't choose the full picture. They chose a small piece, then another, without being told where it would lead. That's the power of gradual commitment. It takes control one step at a time, using the person's own will against them. The foot in the door technique doesn't look threatening. It often feels encouraging, supportive, safe. But behind that safety is a plan, a slow path from simple action to deep dependence. Each ask seems reasonable. Each step seems small, until suddenly the person looks up and sees they've walked far from where they started, with no easy way back. Indoctrination of children begins early and works quietly. It doesn't require force or fear right away. It works through repetition, routine, and trust. Young minds are open. They take in what adults say without strong filters. They want to understand the world, and they rely on caregivers, teachers, or group leaders to guide them. When those guides repeat one belief system over and over and frame it as the only truth, children learn it without question. That belief becomes part of who they are before they have a chance to examine it. In high-control groups, children are taught group values before they know other views exist. They hear the same stories, use the same words, and live by the same rules as the adults around them. There is no contrast, no alternative model. The child assumes this is just how life works. Obedience becomes normal. Belief becomes habit. A 5-year-old wakes up in a shared home. Everyone begins the day with a group prayer or chant. They eat together, read from the group's teachings, and start tasks assigned by adults. The child sees this routine every day. They don't call it doctrine, they call it life. If they ask why things are done this way, they hear the same answer: this is the truth. If they ask about the outside world, they're told it's lost, broken, or evil. Curiosity is redirected. Doubt is labeled as immaturity. The child learns not to ask again. The group may teach that children are spiritually chosen or born into a sacred path. This makes the child feel special, but also responsible. They are told their role is to serve, to obey, or to protect the truth. Any behavior that steps outside the group's values is punished or shamed. The child learns early that safety comes from compliance. Affection and approval are tied to belief. In some cases, children are given adult-level expectations. They are told to correct each other, memorize teachings, or monitor their thoughts. A 10-year-old might be asked to confess doubts during group meetings. If they hesitate, a leader says, "You must be pure in heart." The child tries harder. They cry when they make mistakes. They think guilt is a sign of growth. They don't see that they are being shaped, not supported. Schools within the group often avoid outside material. Lessons are based on the group's worldview. History is rewritten. Science is filtered through belief. Literature is selected for moral alignment. Children learn dates, numbers, and grammar, but always within the context of the doctrine. There's no room to explore other perspectives. The group says it's protecting the child from confusion. What it's doing is limiting thought. A teenage boy studies biology from a group-written book. It says modern science is flawed and teaches that only the group's view of life is valid. When he asks about evolution, the teacher says, "That's a lie used to confuse people." No one in his world believes in it. He lets it go. He gets good grades by repeating what he's told. He never learns how to weigh ideas on his own. Language also plays a role. Children learn group-specific terms early. These words shape how they see the world. Concepts like outsider, sacred order, or pure spirit become normal. Everyday terms are redefined. Freedom doesn't mean choice, it means obedience. Love means loyalty. Doubt means danger. By using the group's words, the child's thinking is already narrowed. Some children are raised to see outsiders as a threat. They're taught that the world beyond the group is unsafe or wrong. They avoid books, friends, or media that challenge their beliefs. They are warned that other people are blind, fallen, or contaminated. This isolation keeps the doctrine intact. Without contrast, the child can't question what they've learned. They can't imagine a life beyond the group. In one community, children are not allowed to play with neighborhood kids. Their parents say those children are unclean or confused. The group hosts its own activities, games, songs, festivals, all tied to the group's message. The children feel happy, loved, and connected. They don't know what they're missing. When one child tries to sneak a book from the library, another reports it. They're told that path leads to ruin. The message is clear. Stay close. Stay pure. Indoctrination also teaches children to fear their own thoughts. If a child feels anger, doubt, or curiosity, they are told it comes from weakness or evil influence. They learn to self-monitor. They confess things that aren't wrong, normal fears, small mistakes, quiet questions, because they've been taught those things are signs of failure. Over time, their inner life becomes something to hide or correct. Children raised this way often struggle with self-worth. They believe love must be earned through perfection. They work hard to obey every rule, say every right thing, and fix every bad thought. When they fall short, and they always do, they blame themselves. They don't see the system as flawed. They see themselves as broken. This makes them easier to control. They look to the group to fix them. They don't see that the group caused the wound. Sometimes the indoctrination is enforced with fear. Stories of punishment, banishment, or spiritual harm are told again and again. Children are shown what happens to those who leave or disobey. The message is repeated. Without us, you're lost. Even if a child questions the teachings, they don't feel safe to say it. They push the doubt down and try to believe harder. Adults in these groups often say they're protecting children. They say the world is corrupt and only the group can keep them safe. But real safety includes freedom to explore, ask questions, and make mistakes. Indoctrination replaces that with control. It teaches children what to think, not how to think. It builds loyalty through fear, not trust. When children raised in these systems grow up, they face a long road. Some stay in the group because it's all they know. Others leave but feel lost. They don't have tools for independent thought. They carry guilt, confusion, and fear, even years after walking away. They may feel like they're betraying something sacred just by asking basic questions. Indoctrination works best when it starts early. A child doesn't need to be forced. They just need to hear the same message over and over from the people they trust most. That message becomes their world. And unless they find a way to step outside it, they may never know there was more to life than the path they were handed. Redefining language is a method of control that works by changing how people speak and think. It starts with creating a special vocabulary that only the group understands. This might include new terms, new meanings for old words, or phrases that sound deep but say little. Over time, members start using these words in daily speech. They stop noticing how their thoughts are shaped by the group's language. They begin to speak in a way that reflects loyalty, even if they're unsure of the message. In high-control groups, everyday words are redefined. Words like love, freedom, truth, and choice may still be used, but their meanings shift. Love means obedience to the leader. Freedom means separation from the outside world. Truth means whatever the group teaches. Choice means saying yes to the path. These changes seem small at first, but they reshape how members think about themselves, others, and reality. A woman joins a self-development circle that promises clarity and peace. Early in the program, she's taught that clarity means alignment with the group's teaching. If someone disagrees, they're called unclear. She hears this word often. When she questions a process, she's told, that's just your lack of clarity. The word stops being neutral. It becomes a tool to shut down doubt. She stops pushing back. She wants to be clear. Jargon is another tool. Groups often invent words or use unusual phrases to describe simple ideas. These terms set the group apart. They make members feel like they're part of something special, but they also make communication with outsiders difficult. If a member tries to explain what they've learned, they stumble. You wouldn't get it, they say. You haven't done the work. That gap keeps the group isolated. It makes outsiders seem ignorant and reinforces the idea that only the group knows the truth. In a wellness community, members talk about shifting their field, clearing density, or raising frequency. These phrases aren't explained clearly. They're used often and with confidence. New members feel lost but try to catch up. They start using the terms before they fully understand them. This creates the illusion of agreement. It's easier to repeat the words than to ask for clarity. Over time, the words start to feel real, even if their meaning stays vague. Groups also use loaded language. Certain words carry emotional weight. Words like toxic, aligned, surrendered, blocked, or awakened can be used to label people and control behavior. A person who questions too much is said to be blocked. Someone who follows orders is called aligned. These labels are hard to argue with. They sound like diagnoses. The member starts to see their thoughts through these filters. They say, "I'm in resistance," instead of, "I disagree." The language makes it harder to think clearly. In one spiritual group, members are taught that anger is always ego. If someone expresses frustration, they're told they're in story or out of flow. These phrases frame emotion as error. Instead of listening, others offer correction. "Drop the story," they say. "Get back in flow." The person starts to doubt their own reactions. They stop expressing anything that might be seen as low vibration. The language acts like a cage. It keeps them quiet. Some groups turn simple acts into sacred duties through language. Reading a book becomes receiving download. Taking a walk becomes grounding energy. Normal behavior is framed in spiritual or advanced terms. This makes the group feel elevated. It also builds pressure. If you skip a session, you're not just missing a meeting, you're breaking frequency. If you question a teaching, you're not just curious, you're feeding shadow. These terms turn small choices into spiritual risks. They create fear around everyday life. The group's language can also be used to control time and attention. Phrases like holding space, staying present, or doing the work become mantras. If a member drifts or appears distracted, they're told to return to the moment. This sounds like good advice, but when used constantly, it becomes a way to block reflection. A person who starts to think critically is told they're in their head. That shuts down the thought. They learn to stay in approved zones of thinking. Redefined language is often paired with repetition. Members hear the same words, phrases, and teachings over and over. This repetition cements the new meanings. After a while, the group's vocabulary becomes automatic. People stop translating. They speak in the group's voice, even when alone. Their thoughts are shaped before they even reach awareness. That's the real power of language. It doesn't just reflect belief, it builds it. A man raised in a closed community says words like worldly to describe outsiders, spirit-led to describe obedience, and covering to describe control. These words are normal to him. He doesn't realize how loaded they are. When he tries to speak with people outside the group, he struggles. They don't share his framework. He pulls back. He feels misunderstood. The language has isolated him. Groups often defend their use of language by saying it's part of their culture. They claim that deep truths need new words, but in practice, the jargon limits thought. It narrows options. It builds walls between members and outsiders. It replaces shared meaning with insider code. That code becomes a test. If you speak it well, you belong. If you don't, you're corrected or ignored. This system works best when it feels natural. The group doesn't force new language all at once. It introduces it slowly. Members hear a phrase, repeat it, and start using it without noticing. Over time, the old meanings fall away. What's left is the group's version of truth. It sounds familiar, but it works differently. It says less, controls more, and leaves little room for disagreement. When someone leaves the group, they often struggle to explain their experience. They say, "It's hard to describe." That's because the words they used inside no longer apply. They must relearn how to speak plainly. They must reclaim words that were once used to control them. Words like truth, love, and freedom must be redefined, this time on their own terms. Redefining language is subtle but powerful. It changes what people say, how they think, and how they see the world. It builds a structure that sounds like meaning but works like control. The words look familiar, but they carry a different weight, and that weight keeps people loyal, silent, and shaped by a voice that no longer feels like their own. Induced phobias are fears that don't come from real threats, but from ideas planted by a group or leader to control people. These fears feel real, even if they aren't based on fact. The group builds them slowly, using repetition, stories, and warnings. They say that danger waits outside the group. They say bad things happen to people who leave, disobey, or question too much. Over time, members stop thinking about leaving. not because they agree, but because they're afraid. These fears often start with small suggestions. A leader might say, "The outside world is full of confusion," or "People who leave the path always suffer." The statements seem harmless at first, but they plant seeds. Later, the message becomes more direct. If you walk away, you'll lose everything. If you stop showing up, you'll fall into darkness. The fear grows. It becomes part of how the person sees the world. In one spiritual group, members are told that leaving causes spiritual death. They say that once you've received the truth, turning away from it brings punishment. Some call it karma. Others call it chaos. One man starts thinking about leaving after a long period of stress. He brings it up to a mentor. The mentor says, "You don't want to end up like the others." Then he tells a story about someone who left and later lost their job, got sick, and was never seen again. The man stays. He doesn't know if the story is true, but he doesn't want to take the risk. Groups also build fears around disobedience. A person who questions the leader might be told they're opening themselves to spiritual attack. A person who skips a meeting might be told they're falling out of alignment. These warnings are vague but heavy. They suggest that harm is waiting just outside the circle. The group never has to prove it. The fear does the work. In a coaching network, a woman misses a call because of a family emergency. At the next session, the leader says, "That's what happens when you let low-vibe energy back into your life." She feels exposed. She wonders if she made a mistake by putting her family first. The leader shares stories of others who fell out of flow and lost their momentum. The woman apologizes. She promises it won't happen again. Some groups use fear of emotional collapse. They say that leaving the group will cause depression, addiction, or breakdown. This works well if the person joined during a difficult time. If they felt lost before, the group can use that memory. "Remember how empty you felt before us?" they say. "You don't want to go back to that." The fear of returning to pain becomes a reason to stay. One man joins a men's circle after a breakup. The group helps him feel strong again. Months later, he begins to feel uneasy about the leader's behavior. When he talks about leaving, the leader says, "You'll go back to being weak. You're only strong here." The man believes it. He stays, not because he feels empowered, but because he's afraid of losing the strength the group gave him. The fear also works socially. People are told that if they leave, no one will want them, that they won't fit in anywhere else, that they've changed too much to return to normal life. Members are warned not to trust outsiders. "They won't understand you," the group says. "They'll pull you down." This keeps people isolated. It also makes rejoining the outside world feel risky and confusing. Children raised in these environments often carry the fear deep into adulthood. They're told stories about people who left and were punished by fate. They hear about betrayal, illness, or spiritual blindness. Even if they stop believing the doctrine, the fear remains. They wake up at night wondering if something bad will happen because they walked away. The fear doesn't need proof. It runs on suggestion. Groups may say they're only offering truth, that their warnings are not threats, but facts. "We're just being honest," they say. "We've seen it happen." But they only share stories that support their claims. They don't talk about people who left and thrived. They don't allow members to hear other points of view. By limiting information and repeating fear-based stories, they build a view of the world that traps people in place. Some fears are framed as spiritual consequences. Others are framed as emotional collapse, financial ruin, or even physical harm. The type of fear doesn't matter as much as the pattern. The group links freedom to danger. It paints obedience as safety. The more fear a person feels, the more they lean on the group for guidance. This makes critical thinking feel unsafe. It teaches people to feel nervous even before they take a step. A woman in a high-demand healing circle is told that if she walks away, she'll lose her connection to divine energy. The idea keeps her up at night. She tries to imagine a life outside the group, but can't shake the fear that she'll feel hollow or numb. When she tries to explain this to her partner, she says, "It just feels wrong to even think about leaving." She doesn't know that feeling was planted in her over time. Induced phobias don't feel irrational to the person inside. They feel like protection. That's what makes them effective. The person believes the fear is helping them avoid disaster. They don't see it as something given to them. They see it as something real based on evidence. But the evidence was shaped by the group, selected to keep them in line. The fear is also reinforced through the group's culture. If someone leaves, they're talked about in whispers. He was never ready, people say. She chose her ego over the path. The group doesn't say these things directly to the person who left. They say them to each other, to the ones still inside. The message is clear: stay, or you'll end up like them. Induced phobias are hard to break. Even when a person begins to see through the group's control, the fear lingers. They may leave, but still wait for punishment. They may live cautiously, expecting something to go wrong. The group no longer needs to control them directly. The fear stays with them, shaping choices, limiting thought, and keeping the past alive. This method doesn't use chains or threats. It uses suggestion, silence, and repetition. It hides behind concern. It says, "We just want what's best for you." But what it builds is not care. It's fear, woven so deeply that the person begins to believe that staying is survival and leaving is doom. And that belief holds them long after the door is open. Deceptive recruitment begins with a false front. The group does not present itself as it truly is. Instead, it offers something familiar, appealing, or safe. It might call itself a wellness circle, a self-development course, a business workshop, or a meditation retreat. The language is broad and welcoming. It avoids specifics. The goal is to get people in the door before they ask too many questions. Once inside, the pressure begins. People join because they want something: healing, clarity, friendship, purpose. The group promises to provide that, but it hides its real structure. It doesn't talk about hierarchy, strict rules, or long-term expectations. It doesn't mention financial demands or isolation from outside influence. These parts are introduced later, once the person feels involved. By then, the person has already made small commitments, met others, and shared personal stories. Leaving feels harder. A woman signs up for a free yoga class in her neighborhood. The space is calm and welcoming. After the session, someone invites her to a weekend retreat. She agrees. At the retreat, she hears new language, talk about energy, higher alignment, the leader's special vision. She's curious, not alarmed. On the second day, she's asked to share something vulnerable in a group circle. She does. Everyone claps and hugs her. She feels accepted. When someone asks her to sign up for the next program, she agrees. It's not until weeks later that she's told she's part of a larger movement. She's already in. The group avoids full disclosure because it knows most people wouldn't say yes if they knew the whole picture. So they offer parts. They promise personal growth without mentioning obedience. They promise support without naming surveillance. They promise truth without naming who decides what truth is. Each promise is a hook. Once someone takes the bait, the line is pulled slowly. Deceptive recruitment works well when the front looks normal. Activism, coaching, mindfulness, and community service all sound good. They draw people who want to make a difference or better themselves. The group doesn't need to hide, they just blend in. They use popular language. They attend public events. They post online using hashtags that suggest wellness or social justice. But behind the scenes, they run by different rules. A man meets a friendly person at a networking event. They talk about business, purpose, and personal discipline. The person invites him to a leadership workshop. He attends and is impressed by the passion and energy. Later, he's invited to a small, private follow-up group. The tone shifts. The leader speaks more intensely. New words are used: awakening, loyalty, deconstructing ego. The man is intrigued. He wants to understand more. He keeps coming back, not knowing that each step is part of a slow path toward full commitment. Deceptive recruitment often includes love bombing. From the start, the person is showered with praise and attention. Their presence is treated as special. They're told they're ready for transformation. This early praise lowers defenses. The person feels seen, maybe for the first time in a long while. That feeling becomes the glue that holds them in place when the deeper parts of the group's teaching are revealed. The group may also use ambiguity to avoid clear answers. When someone asks, "What is this group really about?" they're told, "It's different for everyone," or "You have to experience it." This vagueness makes it hard to pin down red flags. People think, "Maybe I just don't understand yet." They give the group more time. They wait for clarity that never fully comes. Each delay brings deeper involvement. In some cases, the front is a course or class that seems unrelated to belief. A person might join for breathwork, writing, entrepreneurship, or communication skills. The teachings start practical, then slowly they shift. Spiritual ideas are introduced. The leader becomes more central. The group starts using a shared vocabulary. Doubt is framed as resistance. Loyalty is framed as growth. The person realizes the course was not just about learning, it was about joining. Recruiters are often trained to avoid the truth. They're told not to reveal the full nature of the group too soon. Some are even taught to lie by omission. Don't say too much up front, they're told. Let people find their own way. They may believe this is helpful. They think if someone just gives it a chance, they'll understand. But the effect is the same. The person makes a decision without full information. That's not consent. That's manipulation. Even when someone senses something is off, the group has prepared for that. They say things like, growth isn't comfortable, or that discomfort means you're close to a breakthrough. The person doubts themselves, not the group. They stay longer, hoping it will all make sense soon. If the person asks hard questions, the group often turns it back on them. Why are you so focused on labels? Why do you need to define everything? These responses sound deep, but they dodge the issue. The group avoids transparency. The more questions a person asks, the more they are seen as a problem. Eventually, they learn to stop asking. Deceptive recruitment also works by limiting early access to the full group. New people are brought into small events or filtered spaces. They meet hand-picked members who present the best version of the group. These members are warm, articulate, and loyal. They know what to say. They're not lying. They're just showing the part they believe in. The new person sees this and thinks, if they're this kind and balanced, the group must be good. But they haven't seen the whole picture yet. By the time someone realizes what they're part of, they've already invested time, money, or emotion. They may have shared personal stories or been praised for their openness. They may have distanced themselves from outsiders. They feel pressure to keep going. If I walk away now, what does that say about me? They wonder. This sunk cost keeps them inside. The hook worked. Now they're on the line. The group doesn't need force. It just needs time. Time to shift from the mask to the message. Time to move from invitation to obligation. Time to turn a simple yes into full commitment. That's how deceptive recruitment works. It hides the full truth. It invites curiosity, not caution. And once someone is drawn in, it surrounds them with support, pressure, and a new reality, one small step at a time.